Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In the case of Jenna Burley, she was discovered in a plastic container outside of town while attending a friend's birthday celebration. It's challenging to infer a stranger's motivations from their appearance or speech alone. At first glance, a stranger may appear well-groomed, act courteously, and offer assistance with the best of intentions. In actuality, though, these people are frequently the ones who lure their selected victim into a false sense of security so they can be robbed, abducted, exploited, or killed. Unfortunately, the victim frequently discovers they have slipped into a lethal trap too late. In 2017, the nation was stunned by the tale of Jenna Burley, a regular American student and well-known blogger. Thousands of people first joined the hunt for the missing girl in the hopes that she was still alive. But nobody could believe what had occurred when the horrifying truth was made public. This party ended up being the last night of the girl's life, even though she had only gone to celebrate her friend's birthday. The disaster resulted from a sad combination of drunkenness and the innocent desire to put his trust in a charming stranger who just so happened to offer his assistance. Jenna Burley was who? Born on November 4, 1994 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania's capital, Jenna Nicole Burley is the second of Edward and Jacqueline Burley's 4 children. Her parents never left each other after they fell in love in the late 1980s while attending a Philadelphia university. The couple then got married in the fall of 1991, and their first child, a daughter called Janelle, was born in 1992. Our story's heroine was born 2 years later, and shortly after, their sons, Jeffrey and Jacob, came into the world. The Burley family was committed to serving others. Edward was working at a hospital that specialized in patient rehabilitation following illnesses and injuries, while Jacqueline worked in a nursing home. In an effort to provide the best for their kids, the parents brought them up in a loving and caring environment. Along with her siblings, Jenna always had a close relationship with her parents. She was raised as a vibrant, upbeat, and active young woman with a creative side, a lot of charisma and leadership abilities. She loved animals, did well in school, acted in the school theater from an early age, and always had many of friends. The family Burley was neither poor nor rich. They made their home in Philadelphia, in a large home in the peaceful, comfortable Harleysville area. Jenna became the life of the party, gained friends fast, and fit right in with any group. The girl, who was always trying out different appearances and styles and occasionally came across as very lavish, dreamed of becoming a fashion designer in high school. Jenna, who occasionally resembled a hippie and other times an emo subculture member, wore vibrant makeup, dyed her hair multiple colors, and wore her clothes in a variety of fashions. She pushed her pals to question the ordinary routine since she loved making a statement. The adolescent girl regularly went to concerts, fairs, and other large gatherings that provided her with inspiration. Burley's opinions and interests started to change as she approached her high school graduation. Instead of pursuing a career in fashion design, she suddenly envisioned herself in the film industry. She took workshops at a nearby film studio to learn how to make short films, and her talent was immediately apparent as she handled each plot and production step with originality. Jenna also created accounts on a number of social media platforms at that time, where she kept up with her pages and shared her interests in life, as well as her thoughts on a range of important societal topics. The senior in high school immediately had a sizable fan base, and her viewership expanded swiftly as well. Following this lively, artistic girl who was always experimenting with her appearance and inspiring others to embrace self-expression seemed to be enjoyable. Before she knew it, Jenna had gained a following of several thousand people and was a fairly well-known blogger. The 18-year-old recent high school graduate studied media arts at a prominent college in sunny Florida in 2013. The student continued to actively maintain and grow her blog while studying, sharing anecdotes about her experiences with significant injuries, protracted despair, parties, and other forms of entertainment with friends, her involvement in the community and school life. After just one semester of college, Jenna returned home on December 20, 2013 to spend Christmas with her family. The weather was severe, and snow had already fallen on Philadelphia at that point. Jenna wore utterly improper shoes and failed to account for the stark contrast from Florida, which led to her slipping and falling and severely breaking her ankle before she ever made it to the house. A double fracture with displacement was discovered by X-ray, necessitating surgery and the installation of specific pins and plates. Burley was literally confined to a wheelchair for several months, since she was unable to bear any weight on her foot. She then had to go to regular physiotherapy sessions and relearn how to walk. In this time frame, additionally, she contracted pneumonia, which made her recuperation much more difficult and time-consuming. The girl was quite disappointed that she had to take a leave of absence from school in order to concentrate on getting better. She only found comfort in social media, where Jenna engaged in active communication with her followers, and in her personal blog, where she shared excerpts from her ideas and journal entries. Nearly every day, Jenna uploaded new videos in which she addressed a variety of subjects and answered questions. She was an outspoken opponent of zoos, dolphinariums, and other establishments that keep animals in captivity and use them for entertainment. She also raised awareness of the challenging situation of the homeless, pointing out that those in warm, temperate regions had it much easier than those in Pennsylvania, where those without a roof over their heads run the risk of freezing to death on the streets. Additionally, Jenna, who was already actively involved in charitable work on a regular basis, started planning fundraisers to provide necessities to homeless and animal shelters. Jenna started creating her own jewelry while she was recovering, selling it online and giving away all the money to help those in need. She emphasized that what may appear to be junk filling a closet to some could be a true treasure to someone less fortunate, and she actively urged her followers to donate unwanted stuff to charity. Jenna ended up staying at home for over a year rather than just a few months because the recuperation process took so long. She enjoyed the puppy she got from a local shelter during this period, and she wrote about it on her blog every day, sharing tales of their daily adventures. However, despite her outwardly positive attitude, Jenna experienced a severe depressive episode in the fall of 2014. She openly acknowledged that she needed professional assistance from a psychiatrist because she was unable to manage on her own any longer. Speaking candidly about her struggles with mental health, Burley shared her doctor's advice and talked about the support she received from her family and pet. During this time, the blogger's following increased many times as a result of the fact that many young people could identify with the difficulties she detailed and appreciated her candor. Jenna traveled to sunny California in the beginning of 2015 with her father and younger brother Jacob. In her social media posts, Jenna expressed how much better she felt, and the joyful pictures taken from the beach made it obvious how close she was to her family, the everlasting student. Jenna chose to transfer to a school in her hometown rather than go back to Florida when she recovered completely and traveled with her family. She enrolled in Montgomery County Community College, a Philadelphia suburb, and decided to live at her parents' house. Burley, meantime, kept up her blog and created quick films on a variety of subjects. After graduating with a bachelor's degree in the humanities, Jenna made the decision to attend college, enrolling at Temple University's School of Film in 2017. Jenna decided to remain at her family's house rather than move into a dorm, because the campus was only a half-hour drive away. She no longer needed to rely on family members for transportation to class because she had upgraded her room and purchased her own vehicle by that point. Jenna was 4 to 5 years older than her peers when she started university, having already reached the age of 22. Still, they were in agreement, celebrating, going to concerts, hanging around, and having a good time. The birthdays of each other. It is important to note that Temple University, one of the biggest universities in the nation, is situated nearly in the heart of the city. There are a lot of stores, malls, eateries, bars, and other establishments all around the university. Thus, life is busy here. You could say that after lessons, students always have a place to unwind and rest. Jenna was involved in an automobile accident on her way to school a few days after classes started in late August. Her automobile was severely damaged, but luckily she was not hurt because she was wearing a seatbelt. From that point on, she was typically driven to school in the mornings by her father or one of her younger brothers. Sometimes, if Jenna stayed in the city late, she would spend the night at a friend's house, but she always told her parents in advance. Fatal mix-up on Wednesday, August 30, 2017. At the party, Davis, a close friend and classmate of Jenna's, was going to one of the bars to celebrate his birthday. Among those invited to the celebration was Jenna, who was expected to spend the night at the birthday boy's house in order to attend class with him on Thursday morning. To ease her parents' anxiety that night, she told them ahead of time. Taking pictures and sharing them on social media was a lot of fun for Jenna Davis and her 5 friends. As they went from bar to bar, They made new acquaintances who joined them, wishing the birthday boy a happy birthday and raising a glass to his good health. The gathering had altered considerably by 11 p.m., and everyone was in a rather inebriated state. It was around midnight when the buddies ended up in a crowded little sports pub. Because his buddies had planned a surprise for him, which involved kidnapping him and bringing him to another location, the birthday boy had moved aside. He told Burley about it and asked her to text him when she was going to be to his apartment so they could spend the night together. Jenna and the others remained in the pub. A couple students invited Jenna to stay at their house, and several sober drivers offered to drive her anywhere she wanted to go. However, Jenna said that she had previously arranged to visit Davis' home, but by 1 a.m, friends started to depart, and Burley was unaware that everyone who had offered her a ride or a place to stay had already vanished. A mix-up happened, with disastrous results. Until the very last minute, Jenna thought she would go with someone from the bar, so she bid her pals farewell and promised to remain a little while longer. She was seated at the bar with a bunch of strangers when she finally realized what was going on, and they quickly departed as well. When Jenna realized she was alone and that the bar was shutting at 2 a.m, she began messaging Davis to implore him to come get her. But the man didn't hear anything because he was asleep at home, and his phone was in a different room. Jenna attempted to call some additional pals, but they were either not able to hear their phones or were too inebriated to answer. It didn't seem safe to stroll around the city alone at night, and she didn't want to disturb her parents. The student's disappearance. Upon checking his phone in the morning, Davis got extremely worried after initially believing Jenna had spent the night somewhere else. Jenna had sent him multiple messages and made 2 attempts to call him, requesting that he pick her up from the bar. The final message she sent was simply, "Help me." Her phone went off when he attempted to call her back. Burley never showed up to the university, but he still thought his friend was all well and would attend class as normal. None of the friends who had joined them at the bar the previous evening had hosted the student in the afternoon, so Davis called and paid them a visit. To find out if Jenna had come home, one of her pals called her parents. She recounted what had transpired after they said no, and Edward and Jacqueline hurried to the college in less than 30 minutes to discover out where and who had last seen their daughter. They talked to her pals. The Burleys went straight to the police to report their daughter missing after receiving no helpful information, requesting that a search be conducted right away. Jenna had sent numerous classmates notes requesting assistance, which added to the urgency of the situation. The academic buildings and dorms were the first locations examined, but the missing student was nowhere to be found. After that, the police called nearby hospitals, but no women who fit Jenna's description had been admitted in the previous 24 hours. The last time they saw the student was in the sports bar, according to everyone who had dealt with her the night before. She was dressed in blue pants and a motivational white t-shirt. She had a light blue hoodie knotted around her waist with a slogan on the front. Her long black hair, which was braided into 2 pigtails, was another distinctive characteristic. News of Burley's disappearance soon went viral on social media because she was a very well-known blogger. Thousands of her admirers sent messages requesting assistance in finding her and urging anyone with knowledge to come forward to the kind and tenacious stranger. The bartender instantly recalled the girl with the braids who stayed late after everyone else had departed when the cops came at the bar where the missing student was last seen. She appeared disoriented, was heavily intoxicated, and was phoning and texting all the time. Around 2 a.m, her phone signal was last picked up in the same neighborhood. We looked over the surveillance footage from the cameras inside the pub and at the entrance. Jenna was spotted by the cops sitting by herself at the bar, sipping a cocktail and messaging. A man came up to her at 1:30 a.m. Eastern, struck up a discussion, and then bought her a drink. Before they left the bar, they sat together for roughly 20 minutes. They were both strolling unsteadily as if they were really drunk, just before it closed. The bartender identified a frequent client right away and even named him Joshua Hupperters when he was shown the video and asked if he knew the man. The bartender claimed that Joshua was practically a daily visitor and that on the previous evening, he showed a special interest in the lonely beauty by purchasing her cocktails and continuously inviting her to his home. Joshua had just reached 29 when the authorities learned that he had previously attended Temple University but had taken a lengthy academic leave and never graduated. He lived only 5 minutes from the bar where he was spotted with Jenna, and he was always hanging out with students. He and his friend Jack Miley had a large apartment that he rented in a building across the street. When they finally got in touch with Joshua later that night, he said he had been so inebriated the previous evening that he had no recollection of a girl from the pub. He consented to be questioned, but shortly after, his phone was switched off, so the police went to Hupperter's flat to speak with him. Jack, the primary suspect, was at home and allowed the cops to enter without any problems. There was chaos in almost every room of the man's flat, which resembled a normal bachelor pad. Jack said that the previous evening, he and his companion had really gone to the sports bar and consumed a lot of alcohol. After Joshua picked up a girl, Jack made the decision to go home so they could have some solitude. According to Jack, he went straight to bed and didn't hear if he was alone or when his roommate returned home. Joshua was concerned when he abruptly began cleaning the kitchen the following day. He had a serious cut on his hand and new scratches on his face. Joshua described this as a regrettable mishap, stating that he had slipped into some bushes while intoxicated. After lunch, he vanished, leaving his phone off and taking some of his possessions with him without informing his friend of his whereabouts or the duration of his absence. The guys resided in a big apartment with a second exit that led to the backyard, which was unguarded. There was a roll of paper towels on a dresser, smeared with what appeared to be blood, and a pair of men's sandals beside the entrance with odd brownish stains. Additionally, the kitchen smelled strongly of cleaning supplies, and there were multiple empty cleaning product bottles lying about the floor. All of this sparked serious suspicions, and Joshua was subsequently regarded as the primary suspect in the student's disappearance case. When the authorities looked into Upper Terrace's past more, they found that he was born and reared in Philadelphia, and that he had experienced trauma from the early death of his father, who had been brutally murdered. Joshua attended Temple University until he was 29 years old, but he never received his degree. He has previously been involved in legal troubles for selling illegal narcotics to pupils. He had also been accused several times with assaults against women in an effort to force them into intimacy and had served several months for burglary. There was still no word on the whereabouts of the missing girl, and the search and initial questioning of the fugitive revealed that the suspect could be quite dangerous. After the FBI became involved in the inquiry, it was quickly established that Joshua's phone had last been in use in Wayne County, close to a lake approximately 230 miles north of Philadelphia. The fugitive may be hiding in the home of his grandmother, who was found to reside in the neighborhood. In fact, Hupperter's was captured at the home of his maternal grandmother. He didn't resist and seemed at ease. He insisted that he was intoxicated on the night of August 31 and, when questioned about the new injuries on his body, he reiterated the tale he had told his roommate Jack about falling into bushes. He gave an explanation for his abrupt departure, saying he wanted to spend the final weekend before courses began with his family. He became silent and wanted a lawyer when the police brought up the fact that they knew he was not enrolled in any university. Experts visited the Philadelphia fugitive's flat, meanwhile, discovered blood traces in the garbage can, on the floor, and in the plumbing. The prospect of finding the young girl alive was dwindling by the minute as they awaited the test results to identify whose blood it was. Along with over $20,000, 0 cents, in cash, many bags containing various illegal substances were discovered during the search of Joshua's room. The enigmatic container. Investigators kept searching Hupperter's house, including the garbage cans, which were fortunately still empty, and the backyard, which was reachable by the second door in the corner. A light blue hoodie, a slogan-emblazoned t-shirt, a sports bra, and a black hair tie with a few dark hairs were discovered inside a black bag. The clothes that were discovered in the trash were very similar to what Jenna was wearing on the day she vanished. Even worse, there were bloodstains on the objects, which made it look quite unlikely that the girl was still alive. Still, the suspect said nothing, and the hunt went on. Hupperter's stepfather suddenly called the police on September 2 to report that the man had visited his mother's Jenkintown home on August 31. He had arrived in a taxi with a heavy, large, opaque plastic container. Joshua clarified that it held his books as well as a few personal items. The following morning, he took another taxi and left the container at the garage. Given his stepson's criminal history, the stepfather thought this was suspicious because the container was abnormally weighty and had an odd smell. Without alerting his wife, the old man made the decision to call the police. Although he was unaware of Joshua's subsequent whereabouts, He overheard him requesting that the driver refrain from recording the journey on the app and pledging to pay with cash. By the time the stepfather, Hupperders, had been caught and a search of his grandmother's home had turned up nothing untoward, the gruesome discovery in the shed had been discovered. Authorities believed the enigmatic plastic container may have been sunk in a lake, but the container's destiny was still unknown. They thought about using divers to help with the search, but things took a surprising turn. Joshua discovered that the spouse of Joshua's grandmother had a little shed far from the home, almost obscured by trees and plants. Although he hadn't used them in a while, the man kept fishing equipment and an old boat there. He chose to inspect the shed on September 3 and discovered that the door's lock was broken. He went in fearing robbers, but everything was in its proper place, aside from an odd container that had never been there before. He flinched in terror when he opened the container. There found a young woman's naked, badly disfigured body inside. He reported the gory discovery to the police right away. The authorities summoned Burleigh's parents for identification after rapidly determining whose remains the retiree had discovered in his shed. When their greatest fears came true, Jenna's father almost suffered a heart attack and her mother passed out. By using surveillance footage and witness accounts at the crime scene, authorities were able to prove that Hupperders had enticed the already inebriated girl to his house after giving her more booze. As Jenna became aware of her situation, she was able to message a number of pals to ask for assistance, but none of them replied. Joshua tried to coerce the girl into intimacy in the flat, but she retaliated violently, scratching the criminal and severing his hand with a kitchen knife. But he beat her head repeatedly against the floor and was able to knock the knife out of her hand. After taking advantage of Jenna and rendering her incapable, he used his bare hands to strangle the poor girl. After that, he cleaned up the crime scene as best he could and put her body in a container he had discovered in the storage area. According to the autopsy, Jenna's death was caused by mechanics, asphyxiation. She had several bruises, abrasions, and even bite marks on her body. She also showed symptoms of personal assault and a traumatic brain damage. Her blood was discovered on the apartment's paper towels and shoes. The defendant's blood and semen were detected on her clothing, and her hair was on the hair tie in the garbage bin. Hupperders' guilt was never in question, but he refused to accept a plea bargain or acknowledge it during the trial and punishment. In addition, a backpack with his documents, money, and a few necessities was found during a search of his grandmother's home, suggesting that the offender had planned to escape but was apprehended just in time. Only a year and a half after the horrifying crime, in the spring of 2019, did the criminal and attacker's trial start. By asserting that the murdered girl had willingly entered Joshua's room and provoked him, the defense lawyers made a valiant attempt to place all the guilt on her. But everyone in the room was indignant at the defense's remarks. The defendant was found guilty on all counts following 9 days of hearings, and he was given a life sentence with the chance of release only after 60 years. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. The exception was Cassandra and her twin brother Rob. When they were younger, they would often spend an entire day telling each other scary stories in a dark room. Rob considered himself to be a natural storyteller. Every time he told a scary story, Cassandra would scream and he would scatter on his bed, mumbling to himself, "You can't even scare the neighbors, little Joey, with stories like that. No, scary stories are not your thing." Together, they also watched the animated series Scooby-Doo, and during that time, they argued over which of the characters was really a vampire disguised as a ghost. Her brother was anxious because Cassandra's intuitive guesses were frequently more accurate than his. Even though Mary Smith did not have the twins' enthusiasm for reading, she nevertheless bought her kids' books by Robert Wall because she wanted them to grow up to be lifelong readers. The brother and sister's love of scary stories was a lifelong passion that they developed as children. Even as adults, they entertained the idea of launching a horror-themed store and even gathered figurines of villains. Cassandra joined the set in 2004 due to her interest in horror films, and she made a cameo in a scary film that, while not very successful, still caused a lot of jealous looks. I'm ready to play anyone. Rob, You must have made some acquaintances there, right? Cassandra, maybe we should talk. Rob's sister responded, I'm pretty close with the head of the cast. Maybe something will come out of it, but no promises. I got the part by accident myself. Rob continued to beg his sister to broker a deal on his behalf. Rob was overjoyed, but even in an episodic role, he was unable to land a role. Colin Dudley was the leading man in that film, and chemistry blossomed between him and the newcomer on the set. None of them dared to take the first step. But that all changed at a Halloween party at the office. Colin dressed as Alex from A Clockwork Orange, and Cassandra dressed like Velma from Scooby-Doo. Colin perceived the cartoon character as more than just a costume, while Cassandra saw it as just that, a costume. Like his character in the movie, he strolled around with a glass of milk and gave everyone a glare. He read passages from the book as well. He would look at Cassandra and say, Beauty invariably caused my only desire to destroy it, for it did not fit at all into our ugly world. Cassandra took this as a compliment, and they soon started dating. But their brief relationship lasted only a few months. Colin began dating Rebecca, another actress, after finding her. The pair eventually moved in together. 2020. August 25th. Cassandra Cannell vanished. Without giving anyone any notice, she took off from home in her car in an unknown direction and didn't pick up the phone. For a very long time, the police refused to accept her mother's report, attempting to console the distraught mother by explaining that kids grow up and don't always tell their parents when they go out with friends. But Mary Smith was certain that something horrible had occurred, and perhaps she could still see her daughter alive if the indolent police would finally get to work. It took 2 days for the police to start looking for Cassandra, and on the third day, they discovered her car in an undesirable location beneath a bridge. The bad news gets even worse. The keys were inside the unlocked car. It was hard to know what Cassandra was up to there. This area was thought to be a homeless community, and the police regularly discovered bodies there that had either overdosed on illegal drugs or been killed in domestic violence. The police had to patrol the neighborhood, questioning a large number of homeless people who attempted to flee when they saw them. All of them were unaware of the time the car appeared there, though, and none of them had seen Cassandra. It was difficult to have any higher expectations of the people who lived beneath the bridge and consumed alcohol all day. As directed, the detective working on Cassandra's case asked to see her cell phone bill, but he knew from past experience that this would not help him in any way. And so it did. The signal indicated that the phone was in the body of water closest to the bridge, making it impossible for the investigators to retrieve it and obtain the information they required. Still, a group of divers started combing the shoreline. To see how far they could throw the phone, they picked up rocks from the shore and tossed them into the water before doing so. Cassandra's mother claimed that since her daughter's phone case was adorned with rhinestones, it would be easy to locate. While it is true that the phone was located quickly, Cassandra's body was not in the water. Although her mother was told this was good news, she did not feel any better. Her daughter's death appeared to have become second nature to her, and all she wanted was for her body to be discovered and for this terrifying period of uncertainty to end. She replied, I was looking forward to my granddaughter. I wanted to be a grandmother sooner, and I didn't even have time to give her a crib. It's just sitting in the garage in a box. What should I do with it now? The mother was saddened to learn that this became crucial information for the inquiry. Pregnant women are frequently the victims of crimes committed by their partners, the expectant fathers, according to statistics. However, Mary Smith was unaware of the identity of her future granddaughter's father. Cassandra had not even met anyone and was single, even though her age was already apparent. It made sense that she had become pregnant through a male partner, but Mary was unaware of the child's possible father. Even so, according to her mother, her daughter frequently called and corresponded with someone. However, for some reason, her interlocutor's phone number was not entered in her daughter's book, and the mother, understandably, could not recall the numbers. She had just realized that it was kind of weird to talk to someone so frequently and not get his phone number down. It was common knowledge that girls could not maintain complete confidentiality in their relationships, so Cassandra should have at least one friend with whom she could share her secrets. particularly if those secrets involved a pregnancy. One found a friend like that. She disclosed that Cassandra had revived her romance with her ex-boyfriend Colin Dudley in a chat with law enforcement. Yes, their 2004 relationship was brief, and they had already broken up 15 years earlier. In general, it was odd that they could still recall one another after all this time. Colin, as it happened, contacted Cassandra in 2014. He discovered Cassandra on Facebook, wrote her some kind words, and revealed that he and his wife Rebecca had a tense relationship before his father's recent death. Thus, he had no one with whom to commiserate. Cassandra made the decision to get together purely out of friendship and speak with her ex-boyfriend to help him feel better. However, the cordial get-together evolved into something more. Colin started leading a double life in 2014, with Cassandra acting as his mistress. The young woman did not want to tell Colin Dudley that she was pregnant when she found out. She remembered their conversation, in which Colin declared emphatically that he wanted no children at all, and that he was delighted Rebecca was infertile, every time she felt the need to tell him so. Cassandra didn't want to hurt her lover, so she kept the possibility of his having a daughter or son a secret because she knew it could destroy a real family. In the meantime, her tummy continued to swell and protrude beyond the baggy sweaters. Cassandra stopped seeing him so that Colin couldn't figure out anything. But how can one go on? She knew that hiding it would not last long, and that lying to Colin about having another boyfriend would be hurtful and lead to their breakup. Cassandra told Colin over the phone that she was expecting a child with him after deciding that the bitter truth was preferable to a charming lie. After a long period of silence, Colin finally expressed his happiness at the news. Though it sounded very strange, Cassandra deduced that Colin was actually happy. When the detective knocked on Colin's door upon arriving at his residence, his wife answered. Resolving that discussing a missing mistress with Colin's legal wife wasn't entirely moral, the detective presented himself as a longtime friend of Dudley's. Colin emerged at once, closed the door behind him, and left the house accompanied by the detective, who had not even made an introduction. He appeared to have been anticipating this encounter. "Thank you for not making your credentials public in front of Rebecca. You're a man of honor, a true officer. My compliments to you," Colin said in brief phrases. "I heard Cassandra is missing. It's weird, bloody weird. I can't even guess where she might have gone. She told me she'd had a big fight with her brother and was really worried about it. I advised her to stop by and make up with him. I don't know if she listened to me or not." Rob had told him about the fight. As far as the detective knew, it was just a family dispute, nothing serious. Still, Cassandra's twin brother had been devastated by her disappearance because the day before, Cassandra had called him and asked to come talk to him. But now that his arrogant brother had declined, he held himself responsible. His sister would not have vanished if she had visited him that day. "You know, officer, I'm not the nicest person. I think you realize that, dating my ex-girlfriend in secret from my wife for such a long period of time. I'm sure I'll be punished for it in the next world. But the human heart doesn't decide who you fall in love with. In 2014, my father died. He literally hated Rebecca with all his soul, and the feeling was mutual. But he really liked Cassandra. He often remembered her, reproached me for the fact that we broke up with her almost immediately after Christmas. We often fight with our parents, accusing them of not understanding, and then it turns out that it's us, their children, who don't understand, and it hurts. My father was right, of course. And after he died, I just wanted to fulfill one of his wishes, and so I resumed my relationship with Cassandra. Rebecca needed to be broken up with. It was a conversation I kept putting off, you know. This family stuff sucks you dry, so I kept stalling. I've been living a double life for 5 years. It was hell. I had to make excuses for coming home late all the time, to hide it. I'd tell her about some fictitious business trips, and even bought a fishing rod, even though I hated fishing. A stupid pastime, and I'd tell Rebecca I was going to the lake while I went to Cassandra's. Before coming home, I'd buy fish at the supermarket for extra convincing, and Rebecca would bake it in the oven, and I'd eat it even though the smell of fish makes me sick. Did you know Cassandra was pregnant? What? Pregnant by whom? I don't have that information, but she told a close friend of hers that it was from you. That can't be true. She's been adamantly refusing to see me lately, and I guess I understand her and can't blame her for that. Naturally, she was tired of being in the background and wanted a family, which unfortunately I couldn't give her. I guess that the reason she refused to see me was because she had found someone else. Detective asked, "When was the last time you saw her?" Honestly, I can't even remember. I think it was about 3 months ago, maybe 4, if you don't count the time we literally ran into her at the mall by chance. But that was fleeting because my wife was in the fitting room, and I just got tired of waiting for her and decided to take a walk to the coffee shop. Tell me, officer, is there any chance you'll find her alive? Dudley continued. We're doing everything we can, believe me. Colin had more interactions with the detective after this one. Despite the fact that Cassandra's phone was recovered from the bottom of the pond, the police still asked for the missing person's call logs. The unsigned number her mother had informed her about actually belonged to Colin Dudley. Cassandra called him most of the time, and they even spoke on the day she vanished. Furthermore, the CCTV footage from the train station near the bridge, where Cassandra's abandoned car had been discovered, was given to the police that day. A strange man who stood out among the other passengers on the platform was observed by them. He had on a long cloak, gloves, a scarf covering his face, and a hat with the sides pulled down over his eyes. The detective claimed that although he couldn't see the man's face, Colin Dudley's gait was strikingly similar to that of the man. Regarding the hat, it bore a striking resemblance to the one donned by Alex in A Clockwork Orange. The investigators noticed that the strange man actually entered the cafe for a short while before exiting and heading toward the parking lot, where he got into his car and drove off. After they kept tracking him down through the CCTV cameras, the stranger never revealed his face to them during this entire time, but they were able to see the car's licensee plate number, which belonged to Colin Dudley, that the stranger got into. A search warrant was used to send a unit to his home. It was the detectives' hope that Cassandra was still alive and in Dudley's home's basement. Initially, there was no proof of a homicide at Colin's residence. However, they discovered the exact hat Colin was attempting to conceal himself in the closet. After that, they descended to the basement, where they found no sign of the crime and no sign of Cassandra. But when the service dog sniffed the couch, it was trained to search for bloodstains. It barked, and that raised red flags right away. Colin affirmed that he hadn't broken any laws. The police were attempting to blame him, an innocent man, for the crime because they had no other leads and no evidence. When the detective spoke with his wife, she was naturally horrified to learn about the activities in their home, the charges against her spousey, and the years-long deception. She had a lot to say about her husband and her feelings, but after giving it some thought, she responded negatively when the detective asked if her husband was capable of murder. Rob and Mary Smith were furious that Colin could not be imprisoned despite the abundance of evidence against him, and the detective was simply raising his hands. Colin was brought in once more for interrogation. Considering that he had an alibi for every accusation, he gave the crime considerable thought. Colin visited a hardware store early on August 25th at 6:30 a.m. and bought trash bags and household cleaning supplies. The store's cameras did, in fact, verify this, but this whole thing was overshadowed by the big garbage bags. Then Cassandra texted Colin to let him know that she was almost at his house, but Colin quickly deleted the message. But it stayed in the cell phone carrier's memory, and the call-in message dump gave it to the police. Additionally, the couple did not leave the house for several hours that morning, based on their cell phone bill. Subsequently, Colin switched off his phone, but unintentionally left his mistress's phone on. This allowed the police to track Colin's entire path of movement, including his location as captured by the station's CCTV cameras. It was already known by the police that he had visited the cafe, likely using the restroom to clean up after the murder. Colin hopped in his car and headed to the pond where he had thrown Cassandra's phone, which was where the cell phone's last signal had come from. Now was the time to find Cassandra's body. The GPS tracker from Colin's car was taken by the police so they could follow the route precisely. The gadget accurately mimicked Cassandra's mobile signal movement. However, his actions the next day provided fresh evidence in the case. When the police followed his route through the woods, they came across a large trash can that was rope-tied in a ravine. Blood stained the entire area surrounding it, making it obvious what was inside the container. It was a month after the murder by that point, and the body was hard to identify. The description of Cassandra's tattoo in the search notes proved helpful to the police. The same day, Colin was arrested and accused of murder. After performing a forensic examination, forensics determined that blunt force trauma to the skull resulted in a fracture that caused death. The police discovered bloodstains in the basement of the Dudley house that were impossible to remove entirely. Rebecca was unaware of the homicide. She spent the entire day in a different area of the house where the sounds from the basement were muffled. She also stated that Colin's claim that she was infertile was untrue and that she had never desired children. This was seen by the police as the crime's motivation. The absence of witnesses and tangible evidence, like the murder weapon, made it impossible to persuade the jury that Colin Dudley was the murderer during the trial. The murderer was then offered a reduced sentence by the court in exchange for his guilty plea. Colin received a 26-year prison sentence. The fact that the murderer would probably live to see the day he could be freed caused great distress to Cassandra's mother and brother, who were still upset about his refusal to meet with his sister prior to her death. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Till death do us part doesn't often last that long. Feelings of sweetness and tenderness can rapidly give way to disappointment, annoyance, and even hatred. The most sensible course of action in certain situations is to break up, if not as friends, then at least not as enemies. However, when big quantities of money and the opportunity to become wealthy quickly come into play at the expense of an ex-lover's life, an innocent person's destiny may be decided. The example of Gary Bentley is hardly unusual. Although people have been slain for much less, the murderer in this case wanted to keep $1 million and live a comfortable and easy life. Did Gary foresee what would occur? According to his parents, he did. They were trying to protect him since they felt uneasy and worried about him. However, Gary found it hard to accept that his child's mother, the love of his life, was truly capable of murder. Even though his mother was still alive, he battled valiantly to keep his failing marriage intact for the sake of his kid. But ultimately he died and the youngster was left an orphan. What is known about Gary Bentley's early life then? On August 31, 1984, Gary Lewis Bentley was born in Louisville, a small rural hamlet in Jefferson County, Kentucky. He was the youngest of Gerald and Lisa Bentley's 2 children. From a young age, Gary and his older sister Amy had a tight and trustworthy relationship. The Bentleys owned their own farm and put a lot of effort into providing their children with a quality education and other necessities. The children helped out as well and weren't afraid to take on the physical and labor-intensive tasks involved in farm management. The family was close-knit, supportive, and always looking out for one another. Gary spent a lot of time with his father, Gerald, from an early age. They frequently went hunting, fishing, and camping together and were quite close. His father showed him where to collect edible mushrooms and berries, taught him how to handle a pistol, and gave him survival tips, including how to survive in the bush. Gary became quite interested in guns as a teenager. He eventually began collecting firearms and understood how to use them. He was best friends with his father and they went fishing or hunting almost every weekend. Gary was a true handyman who could make or mend almost anything, making him the epitome of a small-town gentleman. He was described by many around him as gentle, laid-back, and always ready to provide a helping hand to those in need. Gary had no bad habits, avoided negative influences, excelled in school, and never ran afoul of the law. He was a calm, introspective child who prioritized his family. Gary majored in engineering in Frankfurt, the state capital, where he attended college after high school. He returned to his hometown of Louisville after graduation, where he began his career as a basic electrician before swiftly rising to the position of his one and only love. Gary fell in love with Tasha, a girl he met while attending college. They didn't mind the slight age difference between them, even though she was about 1.5 years older than he was. They moved in together in 2006, not far from Gary's parents' house, after dating for a while. Tasha was pursuing a nursing degree when she was hired by one of the city's hospitals, where she immediately gained the respect and admiration of her colleagues. But she didn't stop there. In order to further her profession, she continued to work and pursue further studies. Gary and Tasha ultimately made it official in 2012 by inviting all of their family and friends to their lavish wedding. The couple was ecstatic when Tasha became pregnant shortly after. They welcomed a child, whom they named Connor, in the spring of 2013. Both Gary and Tasha had successful jobs by the time their first kid was born. They were able to travel, purchase 2 automobiles, move into a larger, more comfortable house, and essentially live worry-free because they were earning a solid living. A few years later, Gary's plans to have a large family and at least 2 more children with Tasha began to fall apart. What did Tasha conceal? Their marriage was ideal for the first 4 years. They were viewed as a model pair. They held well-respected, lucrative careers. We are excellent guests, wonderful parents, and close friends. The couple frequently invited close friends and family to gatherings they hosted at their house. When someone needed assistance or support, they were always the first to offer it. Gerald and Lisa, Gary's parents, are ecstatic with their daughter-in-law and grandchild. However, things began to drastically shift in 2016. After going through a difficult period, the Bentleys' marriage started to suffer. It all began when Tasha started experiencing issues at work, which had never happened to her before. She was often griping about the terrible working conditions, her supervisor and her co-workers. Gary tried his best to help her, but he cautioned her against quitting too soon because it would be difficult to find another position that paid well. The couple made the decision to take a trip in the fall of 2016 in an attempt to decompress and release some stress. They flew to a vacation, leaving their son with Gary's parents, along with their long-standing friends Annie and Kevin Day, with whom they had been close for years. They traveled to Jamaica. The initial days of the journey were ideal. They all enjoyed one another's company, explored the island, and unwinded on the beach, but Tasha appeared preoccupied, as if her thoughts were elsewhere. She was often texting someone, and if someone asked her who she was speaking to, she became quite protective. Gary and Tasha began to quarrel more and more the longer they were on the island. Their pals claimed that Annie and Kevin felt uneasy since the disagreements seemed to start out of nowhere and swiftly turned into heated disputes. When Gary and Tasha got into a heated dispute one day while on a yacht, Kevin attempted to lighten the mood by cracking a joke. Gary splattered beer on his face in retaliation. Kevin didn't take it personally, since he knew that Gary's response was more about the stress that Tasha was causing than it was about the joke. After feeling ashamed, Gary repeatedly apologized and said he had no idea what had happened to him with the new job. Tasha informed Gary that she had resigned from her position shortly after they got back from their trip. Gary wasn't pleased with her choice because his family's financial status may suffer if she lost such a high income. He did, however, have some funds that would enable them to survive and continue their way of life till she got another work, because he was a prudent and thrifty guy. However, Tasha was employed as a consultant at a large pharmaceutical company the day after she quit. She hadn't mentioned getting a job before quitting, so this was strange. Although it appeared that someone might have assisted her in getting the job, Tasha dismissed it as pure serendipity, claiming that she happened to stumble into the interview. Even though Tasha appeared content with her new career, circumstances at home didn't improve. She stopped cooking, was rarely there, neglected the house, and showed no concern in Gary's situation. She even neglected their son, letting his grandparents handle the most of the child rearing. Mrs. Bentley began to leave town on the weekends, claiming to be on work travels. She was always talking on the phone, always finding a quiet place where no one could listen in. She claimed that it was work and that she needed to talk to her supervisors or coworkers about it when questioned. In order to prevent anyone from checking her phone, she also set a password, something she had never done before. She'd become aloof and secretive. Gary, however, was the one who was caring for his son and giving him all of his love and attention, spending all of his free time with the youngster and doing everything he could to ensure he didn't feel abandoned. He nearly lived for him. Gary still loved his wife and wanted to keep their marriage intact, if only for the sake of their child, despite their frequent arguments and her lack of interest. Mexico excursion with the family. Seeing the strain in their son's family, Gary's parents made the decision to take him, Tasha, and their grandchild to one of Mexico's most stunning resorts as a surprise, in the hopes that it would provide a tranquil setting for them to re-establish contact and spend quality time together. They selected a comfortable hotel in a remote location. The internet was spotty and frequently interrupted, and cell coverage was scarce. This made it possible for the family to spend time together and enjoy one another's company. At the beach and go for lengthy strolls. Tasha, though, was clearly annoyed by the lack of connectivity. She was always looking for a signal to send texts or make phone calls. She became enraged and screamed at Gary's parents and their young boy. Gerald, Gary's father, thought her actions were odd and made the decision to speak openly with his son. He expressed his concern that Tasha might be cheating. Gary attempted to laugh it off, but Gerald could tell by the expression in his eyes that his son was thinking the same thing but was feigning indifference. Because of their daily arguments, Tasha insisted that they end their vacation early and go back home. Citing pressing work issues, she finally prepared her belongings and declared that she would return by plane by herself. Even though they were paid for an additional week at the hotel and received no reimbursements, this compelled the other members of the family to depart early with her. An odd series of fires in the spring of 2017, Tasha called Gerald, her father-in-law, and sounded upset, asking him to come and get her. She clarified that her automobile was totally wrecked after catching fire at a fueling station. She had to visit her insurance provider before returning home. Gerald naturally hurried to her aid, but he couldn't get rid of the uneasy feeling. In the years she had known Gary, one of her automobiles had inexplicably burned up 3 times. The car was reduced to scrap metal each time it occurred at a gas station, making it hard to identify the true origin of the fire. Tasha consistently earned substantial insurance settlements, and the events were consistently attributed to malfunctioning gas station equipment. Tasha would insure the cars for the maximum amount shortly prior to the fires, always using different insurance firms, and these fires occurred around every 3 years. She said she didn't know how it happened, and some family members and acquaintances even speculated that she might have enemies who were deliberately damaging her vehicles. Nevertheless, Tasha purchased a newer, more costly vehicle following each collision. Even if the fires had a suspicious pattern that made intentional property destruction all but impossible, the insurance companies had no reason to reject her claims. By summer 2017, the not-so-secret affair had. Almost every weekend, Tasha would vanish, claiming to be on work excursions. She seemed to live a life apart from Gary and their son, growing increasingly aloof. The Bentley's neighbors, friends, and relatives started to think that Tasha was having an affair. Gary took these rumors quite personally. He gave up making jokes about it, and would either be silent or abruptly shift the topic. Gary's parents made multiple attempts to speak with him, telling him that things couldn't continue this way because, in essence, the marriage had already ended. But Gary consistently gave the same response. For Connor's sake, he was committed to keeping the family together and still loved his wife. He hoped that things would return to normal, that Tasha would wake up, and that she would reevaluate her priorities. Gary, Tasha, and their kids celebrated Thanksgiving at his parents' place in November 2017. Amy, Gary's sister, arrived with her family as well. When gift-giving became commonplace, Tasha claimed to be too preoccupied with her job to purchase any, but it turned out that she had not. She promised to fix it and come back shortly after apologizing and leaving. After spending hours away, she returned with nothing, not even a gift for her son, when everyone stared at her with confusion. It would have taken her the entire night to go through the lineups everywhere, she said. Amy was unable to contain herself this time. She drew Gary forward and asked him directly whether he understood that Tasha was most likely seeing someone else and wasn't even attempting to conceal it any longer. With a gun safe in the bedroom, Gary merely replied that they would take care of it themselves. Gary called his father the next weekend to invite him over and bring some equipment. Gerald was glad to assist and arrived at his son's house with all the necessary supplies in less than 30 minutes. As previously stated, Gary had been a gun collector since he was a young man, and his home was stocked with shotguns, hunting rifles, handguns, and other firearms. He even had some rare objects strewn about in various areas. Gary, however, made the snap decision to create a safe in his home, collect all of his guns, and secure them. Gerald was a little alarmed by this abrupt decision, and inquired as to why Gary felt the need to conceal his gun collection. Gerald could tell his kid was scared of something, even if Gary didn't provide a clear response. It didn't appear like he was concerned about intruders. Tasha claimed that she came up with the idea because she was afraid and thought they would be in danger when she got home. Gerald didn't give it much thought at the time, but her words felt odd. The catastrophe, the unexplained home murder, was just a few days away. On Sunday, December 10, 2017, Tasha called her father-in-law to inform him that the garage door was open when she arrived home, and that she had been unable to get in touch with Gary all day. Concerned that burglars might have broken in, she begged Gerald to come over because she was too afraid to go inside. Fortunately, Gary was at home alone himself and Connor was safe, staying with his grandparents. Gerald ran as quickly as he could. Everything appeared to be in order at first sight. Although the garage door was open, there were no indications that the residence had been broken into. Everything appeared to be typical. There were no signs of an intruder and nothing seemed missing. Gerald repeatedly yelled at his son, but he never answered. He discovered Gary's lifeless body on the bed in shock when he entered the bedroom. Gary's body was already chilly and exhibiting symptoms of rigor mortis when Gerald attempted CPR. Still in shock that his kid had left, he dialed 911 right away. He didn't realize until later that the bedroom gun safe had been broken into and that several of the weapons were gone. The forensic results showed that Gary had been murdered by a single, close-range gunshot to the head when the forensic team arrived. It was possible that he was asleep and didn't even hear the killer approach because he was in a sleeping position on his side in bed and had no other injuries or indications of a struggle. Valuables, a jewelry box, and even cash left in plain sight remained unharmed, making the incident appear to be more than a normal heist. This suggested that the gun safe was the primary goal. Only a small number of guns, none of which were very valuable, were stolen nevertheless. These were not the murder weapon, nor were the remaining firearms. Tasha, Gary's wife, was the leading suspect from the beginning of the investigation, since she didn't appear to be a grieving widow. She carefully explained to the police what had happened during the day before she and her father-in-law discovered the dead. Second, every member of the couple's family and circle of friends attested to the fact that Gary and Tasha's marriage had been in trouble for some time and that a divorce was imminent. Third, 2 big dogs owned by the Bentleys growled at everyone but their owners. However, the neighbors had not heard any barking, and if they had, Gary probably would have awakened up. Tasha stated that she had left the house to run some errands because Gary had intended to go hunting that day. She claimed that after lunch she had attempted to phone him but had been unsuccessful. She attributed the situation to poor reception and was not really concerned. When asked, her pals confirmed that she had visited a friend's house on her way home. The crime was committed without any witnesses. That day, nobody saw strangers or heard anything untoward. Not even surveillance footage from cameras in the area provided any helpful hints. The crime seems to have been a well-thought-out plot to fabricate a robbery in order to get $1 million insurance coverage. Tasha received a call from a friend named Annie Day, who wanted to offer her sympathies and ask if she could assist with funeral planning. Annie was shocked at Tasha's reaction. She explained that she had more important things to do and that Gary's parents were taking care of the burial. A trip to the insurance company for a sizable payoff was one of the more crucial tasks. It seems that Tasha had persuaded Gary to get $1 million life insurance policy not long before the murder. Gary accepted, though he wasn't really happy about it, to appease his wife. Tasha attempted, but was unsuccessful, to raise the compensation to $2 million, 0 cents, a few days prior to the crime. The motive was now obvious, but there was still no concrete proof that Tasha was responsible for the killing. Meanwhile, information about her 3 prior burned-out vehicles, all of which had caused significant damage, came to light. Insurance payouts. It was discovered that Tasha had previously engaged in similar insurance fraud, an accomplice or a lover. Tasha had been seeing a coworker named Anthony for more than a year, according to one of her acquaintances, and he was the one who helped her land a new position. Suspecting that Anthony might have assisted his lover, investigators made the decision to ask him about his role in the crime. Anthony said that he and Tasha had been romantically involved for a long time and that they frequently met at his house. Tasha was going to leave Gary, he said, and they were even going to celebrate New Year's Eve 2018. Anthony hurried to offer an alibi as soon as he became aware that he was being investigated as a suspect in the murder case. He claimed to have been at his parents' house, assisting them with repairs on the day of the murder. That day, they visited a number of second-hand stores, all of which were caught on camera. The murder weapon and the missing guns from the safe were still unknown, but detectives came to the conclusion that Tasha had probably acted alone, which explained why there were no traces of a break-in and why the dogs hadn't barked. Tasha's account of events: Tasha frequently added additional information, changed her tale, and attempted to place the blame elsewhere. She even brought up Gary and Kevin Day's argument when Gary flung beer in his friend's face when they were on vacation. Tasha believes that Kevin may have harbored resentment and seized the chance to exact retribution. But after being questioned for a few hours, Tasha eventually gave up and admitted, although she acknowledged killing her husband, she held Gary responsible for the incident. According to Tasha, Gary was violent toward her and their kid, and on the day of the murder, he struck their child once more. She claimed that was the final straw, and she retrieved a rifle after waiting for Gary to go to sleep. But there was no evidence to support any of Tasha's assertions. Tasha's assertions were not substantiated by any of her relatives or friends. In actuality, everyone supported Gary, praising him as the most loving parent they had ever known, and a loyal, loving husband. They maintained that he would never touch his wife, much less their beloved young boy. Tasha eventually disclosed the hiding place where she had hidden the firearms taken from the safe, including the murder weapon, a pistol, after even the child attested that his father had never harmed him or his mother. It was interesting to see that Anthony's fingerprints were on the gun. It found out that Tasha had left her lover's prints on the gun after giving it to him to hold. If things didn't work out, she intended to frame him, but she confessed before she could carry out that portion of the plan, which included trial and sentencing. Gary's murder trial started in June 2021, and the prosecution claims that money was the main driving force behind the crime. After receiving the $1 million insurance payment, Tasha sought to use some of the funds to refurbish Anthony's home, where she would soon move. Tasha Bentley was convicted of premeditated murder and trying to obstruct the inquiry on July 20, 2021. She received a sentence of 55 years in jail, with the chance of release in 2037 at the latest. Little Connor is currently being raised by his paternal grandparents after losing both his parents in a single, sad event. This crime was discussed in the American Monster episode of Investigation Discovery. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. In the mid-1920s, the story of Dina Thompson, a British woman who was known as the Black Widow, was the subject of many crime shows and documentaries. At first glance, this woman seemed nice, but she turned out to be a pathological liar and con artist who killed at least one man who loved her deeply. Dina got away with many crimes, but in 2003, she was finally put in jail. Even though the person was facing life in prison, the court was surprisingly lenient and let them out on parole. So, in 2022, one of the most dangerous criminals got away with her crimes after miraculously surviving her evil ex-husband. Experts say that the fact that Thompson's victims were always men may be a sign that the criminal experienced some kind of trauma as a child or teen. Dina, on the other hand, had a very good childhood. The girl was born in North London in 1960 and grew up with her whole family. Their family didn't have much, but they made sure their daughter had everything she needed. Their head of the family worked as a prison guard and was very into sports. Dina's father encouraged her to go to gyms as a child, where she worked hard at gymnastics. In addition, the man often took his daughter with him to all kinds of sports competitions, even ones that were held in other countries. As a child, Dina was active, happy, and friendly. She quickly became friends with her peers and, as she got older, learned how to get guys' attention quickly. The girl went to college after high school and then got a job at a bank in the area. When Dina was 22, she met Lee Wyatt, who would become her first husband. Someone set them up on a blind date, which is how they met in the first place. As soon as the two young people met, they fell in love and a rough romance began. They got along great and spent a lot of time together. After 2 years, they made their relationship official. After getting married, the couple moved to Yapton, a small town in the country with only 3,000 people. Soon after, they had a son, and the new parents slowly started their own business by making one-of-a-kind soft toys based on pictures they came up with together. At the same time, Dina worked as a cashier for a construction company. Neighbors said that their family was very happy and doing well. The family head was often away on business trips and wasn't at home for long periods of time. When it came to his neighbors, the man hardly ever talked to them, but his wife quickly became friendly with people in the area. Dina knew how to get along with others, and men were quick to trust her. The pretty young woman often caught their attention. Dina met a young reporter named Julian Webb at the start of the 1990s. The man offered to use her as a model for ads for clothes and home goods, and soon her pictures were in newspapers and magazines in the area. Dina was happy to pose for the picture and didn't mind being looked at. Lee Wyatt hadn't been home in months, and no one was sure where he was or what was wrong with him. It turned out that Lee had been in the small town of New Key the whole time, which is almost on the other side of the country. His plan was to hide from the mafia, so he lived there under a fake name and fake papers. The man's wife told him a series of clever lies to make him believe that their family was in grave danger and that the only way out was to run away. In addition to making unique soft toys, the couple was also known for making a leprechaun named Sean, which sold well and became somewhat famous. Around the beginning of 1991, Dina told her husband that the Disney company liked their creation so much that they were willing to pay £50 million to use the character. But the happiness didn't last long. Soon, the woman told them that criminals had learned about the big deal and wanted to take most of the money while threatening to kill the whole family. Dina also found a way out. She cleverly told her husband he needed to secrete himself. Lee got some fake papers right away and ran away. The woman, however, was very smart and got Lee to write her several threatening letters and record several similar phone calls. She said that this would show that he hated his wife and stop the mafia from after her. The husband did what his wife told him to do because he didn't think anything was wrong. He then ran away. Lee was willing to do any job because he was in a new city and didn't have a home or any friends. He sent all the money he made to his wife and son so they didn't have to worry about anything. Most likely this escape really did save his life, but not from imaginary thieves. His own wife was the real threat. Dina married her new love, Julian, in November of the same year, 1991. The wedding was paid for with the money Lee had sent home, even though Dina had lied to him about it. Webb was deeply in love and very happy, but soon after the wedding, neighbors noticed that the woman often went to see her lovers while her husband was at work. After some time, she told Julian that she was dying and that her job had fired her because of it. The story about the fatal diagnosis and being fired was a lie from the beginning to the end. It also turned out that a lot of money had been taken from the company where Dana worked, and she was the main suspect in the crime. After that, the woman said that her first husband, Lee Wyatt, threatened her and made her do the crime. She showed proof in the form of the letters and recordings that she had herself persuaded him to make. Wyatt went back home as soon as he found out that his wife had married someone else. A scandal was all that the case was about, and Dana said he beat her, but there was no proof of this. The detective still chose to side with the woman, though, so Lee had to quickly leave Yapton again. When Julian was in love, his situation didn't bother him at all, and he spent all of his savings on her fake illness so she could get better. While the money was still there, time went on and Julian began to wonder how the treatment was going. It turned out that the woman didn't have any medical records to back up her diagnosis. Family relationships broke down, and neighbors heard the spouses yelling at each other. Julian's sudden death happened in June 1994, just one day after his 31st birthday party. His mom called him the night before the terrible event, but Dina said her husband wasn't feeling well and couldn't answer. Julian's mom told her sister-in-law to call an ambulance, but her sister-in-law didn't listen. The experts found that the young man died of a drug overdose, but no one thought that this was a criminal act, and the man's wife insisted that her husband had chosen to end his own life. She also wanted Julian's body to be burned, but his parents were very against this. After she died, Dina tried to get a big insurance payment from her husband, but she was turned down because their marriage was ruled invalid. Dina didn't even try to cry or show sadness at the funeral. Instead, she wore an honest outfit and acted rudely. Almost right away after that, the widowed woman started having a lot of affairs and romances. She didn't hide the fact that she had lovers over. She did it in public. Dina filed for divorce from her first legal husband in 1997. A little less than a year later, she met Richard Thompson and fell in love with him right away. Dana didn't give it much thought before telling her new lover that she was very sick and didn't have long to live. The man, who was deeply in love with her, promised to make the last few months of her life into a fairy tale. He was ready to spend all of his savings on this. The wedding took place in one of Florida's best hotels, and the couple spent their honeymoon there before moving to Brighton, England, on the south coast of their home country. Richard said that the way his wife cared for and supported him literally put a spell on him. She also skillfully pretended to agree with all of his ideas and goals. He had always wanted to own his own boat so that he could fish professionally. His wife not only liked the idea, but she also suggested that he start a business renting out yachts so that he could fish and teach other people how to fish. A romantic dinner was planned for Dina and her husband on New Year's Eve, less than a year after they got married. After taking a bath together, she told her husband she had made him a special gift and asked for permission to tie him up. Richard agreed right away because he didn't think anything was wrong. He had ropes around his hands, a blindfold over his eyes, and a gag in his mouth when he was hit hard on the head with a bat. This was followed by another hit. Thanks to his quick thinking, Richard not only didn't pass out but also got away quickly. After that, Dina got a knife and cut her husband in the shoulder. Richard took the gun away from his wife, held her down, and called the police. She broke down in tears and told him she had been lying to him the whole time and spent all of his money. Once she got to the police station, though, she calmed down and started to say that her husband had attacked her and that she was only protecting herself. The story didn't end there. The next day, a real estate agent came to Richard's house to try to sell it. The landlady told him that her husband had left for America on a business trip before their meeting. Richard knew at that moment that his wife was planning to kill him, sell the house, and take the money. Because everyone thought Thompson had crossed the ocean, no one would look for him. It turned out that the woman had taken all of her husband's money out of his bank accounts and used his credit cards to rack up a lot of debt while the case was going on in court. A lot of people heard about the case and other men who used to be with Dina and were cheated on and drained of money by her lies about a fake disease that could not be cured started to call the police. The woman's first husband then talked about how he had to hide for many years, first from people who thought the mafia was after her, and then from the police. It turned out that Dana had stolen from the company where she worked, even though she blamed her husband for everything. Even though there was strong evidence against the woman, she was found not guilty of attacking her husband Richard Thompson. Some people said that Richard made up the story to get attention for himself. Dina was still found guilty of many financial frauds and given a sentence of almost 4 years in prison. All the attention on Dina Thompson also made people think of her second husband, journalist Julian Webb, who died in a strange and sudden way. The woman herself gave very different stories about how and why he died. She said that the steroids her husband took to stay in shape were killing him. Then she said he drank a lot and then passed out in the sun, getting sunstroke. She even said that he killed himself at the inquest, even though she had warned them not to. Dana told her best friend that she had poisoned her husband by putting strong drugs in a dish that he loved that was spicy. The police were able to find the owner of the diner where Julian often ate and picked up food to go. He remembered that Webb's wife had made rice and chicken curry the day before the terrible event. Then, the police thought that this seasoning might have been hiding the real taste of the drugs. Because new information came to light, a new investigation was started, and Julian's body was dug up and sent to be looked at. It turned out that the man was poisoned by a lot of strong antidepressants that were mixed into his favorite curry dish, and then made stronger by aspirin, which Dina mixed into her husband's drink. Webb was still alive when his mother called. He could have been saved, but that wasn't a plan from his wife. For the first time, the Black Widow was put on trial in 2003. During the hearing, The investigator said she was the most dangerous woman he had ever worked with, and the judge said she was a very good liar. Dina Thompson was given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 16 years. People have made documentaries about the crimes of the Black Widow, talked about them on TV, and written about them in the news. Detectives found out about another scary event in Dina's past, even after she was in jail. The person who was one of her first lovers never showed up again and has still not been found, dead or alive. Stanislav Kostov was the young man's name. He lived in Bulgaria, which is where Dana trained as a gymnast in the late 1970s. A romantic relationship started between them, and then the guy was never seen again. The investigation doesn't rule out the possibility that Dana has something to do with this case, and Kostov was one of her first victims. But there was nothing that could be shown. Thompson worked with a prison psychologist and took rehabilitation classes while she was in jail. The detective in charge of Dina's case says that she doesn't feel bad about what she did and can commit another crime even though she has been good and said the right things about re-education and admitting her mistakes. Still, Black Widow, who was 61 years old, was let out of prison in the summer of 2022. Richard Thompson said he wouldn't feel safe now that he knows about it because he doesn't know what to expect from his ex-spouse. Now Dina has to tell the police about all of her relationships and connections, stay inside after dark, and report all of her financial transactions. She also can't talk to her ex-husbands or lovers who were hurt by what she did. She has to wear a special bracelet on her leg that keeps track of everything she does. A few months after she was freed, reporters caught Thompson coming back from the store with a big bag of shopping. On her right hand's ring finger, there was a huge ring that looked a lot like an engagement ring. It is possible that the Black Widow caught another gullible person in her web. Share your opinion with us in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more. Hey guys, today we're diving into another truly horrifying case. If you want to support my channel, make sure to subscribe and stay active. It really helps me out. I'd be super grateful for that. Let's get started. One of the most important people in the tech sector, Forrest Hayes, was discovered dead in Santa Cruz Harbor, California, on November 23, 2013. His death was found on board the Escape, a lavish yacht that he owned himself. When Forrest was discovered unconscious in one of the cabins, attempts to resuscitate him failed. The captain of the yacht called local police informant as the initial responders. A number of perplexing circumstances surrounded the body's finding. Without any indication of struggle, Forrest was discovered laying on his back. There was a noticeable injection mark on his arm, but there was no syringe or medical equipment in the area. As a result, detectives were instantly prompted to think about whether this was an accident or an intentional conduct. There was chaos in the cabin where Forrest was discovered. He had company, as evidenced by the lipstick traces on one of the two wine cups on a tiny table in front of him. A sense of seclusion was created by the meticulously drawn curtains covering every window and the low illumination. There were no obvious indications of violence, yet the scenario was strangely contrived. Forrest regularly used the yacht for private excursions, the captain told the authorities. He said that although Forrest liked to be alone himself on the yacht, he would entertain people from time to time. However, once Forrest set out on this specific voyage, the captain did not witness anyone boarding or departing the boat, and the coroner's preliminary investigation indicated that a drug overdose might have been the cause of death. It was unclear at the beginning of the investigation, nevertheless, if this overdose was an accident or deliberate. More doubts were generated by the fact that there was no syringe found next to the body. Was it removed on purpose, or was it never there in the first place? Investigators started looking into Forrest's life, contacts, business transactions, personal ties, and the circumstances surrounding his death in an effort to find leads. Who had been with Forrest in his last hours was the crucial question. The lipstick-stained wine glass and the absence of obvious evidence at the scene suggested a woman was present, but neither the harbor personnel nor the captain saw anybody get off the yacht after Forrest got on board. Examining Forrest's phone, which was discovered close to his body, was the first step in the inquiry. An initial look through his texts and applications turned up nothing unusual, but the investigators made the decision to delve further into his private life. Investigators believed Forrest might have had a secret side to his life that might provide hints about what had transpired. Despite his impeccable professional image, it became clear from a thorough examination of Forrest's relationships and routines that his apparently ideal existence might have been hiding some surprising truths. In their efforts to comprehend what happened aboard the Escape that tragic evening, law enforcement made finding these their top priority. On May 10, 1962, Forrest Hayes was born in Dearborn, Michigan. He demonstrated exceptional learning skills at a young age, and his innate charisma, curiosity, and talent for handling challenging situations made him a leader among his peers. His captivating personality and drive for perfection were often praised by teachers and classmates, and these attributes set the groundwork for his eventual success in the workplace. Forrest enrolled at a prominent university to study computer science and engineering after graduating from high school. He rapidly became proficient in the state-of-the-art technologies of the time and started working on his own projects, which attracted the interest of significant tech firms. Early in the 1980s, when the information technology sector was just starting to take off, his career really took off. Forrest's 2005 hire by Apple was a turning point in his career. Apple was expanding quickly at the time and was creating groundbreaking devices like the iPhone and iPad. Forrest was hired by the corporation to work in one of the main divisions, in charge of developing cutting-edge technologies. He immediately gained the respect of his coworkers and leadership due to the substantial contributions he made to Apple's projects. Forrest was more than just an accomplished expert. He was a pioneer. He was a vital team player because of his exceptional ability to come up with novel answers to challenging problems. Coworkers recalled his unwavering commitment to putting innovative concepts into practice that improved the usability and accessibility of Apple's products. Forrest developed technology during his time there that went on to become industry norms, but Forrest's aspirations prevented him from taking things easy. He soon accepted an offer from Google to work for the multinational internet behemoth. He joined Google X, a division devoted to creating cutting-edge technologies, after 7 years at Google. In his position, he oversaw projects including smart devices, driverless cars, and other cutting-edge technologies. Forrest's accomplishments include helping to create self-driving car systems, a revolutionary development in the realm of autonomous mobility. According to colleagues, Forrest Hayes had the ability to motivate a group of people and lead them toward challenging objectives. He promoted a positive work atmosphere as a leader who was fair but firm. Forrest gained the respect and affection of his team since he didn't hesitate to take on the most difficult assignments. He was able to successfully oversee large-scale projects that influenced the direction of technology because of his ability to blend strategic thinking with meticulous attention to detail. Forrest's family life and career accomplishments were closely related. He married Denise Hayes in 1996, and the two of them had a close relationship based on support and understanding. Asha, Lily, Roscoe, Lauren, and Daniel were the couple's 5 children. Forrest was a loving parent in addition to being a prosperous businessman. He always found time for his family in spite of his hectic job schedule. He loved spending time with his children, planning family vacations, and establishing customs that strengthened their bonds, according to individuals who knew him well. Forrest seemed to have a happy family life. Situated in one of California's most prominent communities, their $3 million 0-cents home provided a peaceful and comfortable sanctuary. But trips aboard his yacht were the source of Forrest's greatest happiness. For him, the yacht was more than just a means of transportation. It represented the unity of the family. He regularly took his family on quick getaways, where they could unwind and spend quality time away from friends, co-workers, and the bustle of the city. Admired Forrest's ability to strike a balance between his commitment to his family and his career achievement. He demonstrated how to balance professional accomplishments with personal obligations. Those around him were profoundly impacted by his attention to detail and desire to succeed in all that he did. But notwithstanding, Forrest occasionally confided in intimate friends about feeling empty despite the external peace. Though it didn't provide him total fulfillment, he felt as though he had accomplished everything he could have imagined. This restlessness might have contributed to his pursuit of novel hobbies and experiences, which ultimately had disastrous results. Using the app Seeking Arrangement was a big part of Forrest's covert existence. For casual relationships that frequently include financial support, this network connects wealthy people with younger companions. Forrest used the app frequently. He had been texting dozens of women, setting up meetings and negotiating the conditions of their contacts, according to an examination of his account. These connections went beyond simple friendships. Forrest was renowned for providing his companions with lavish assistance, including meeting in private, paying for their expenses, and giving them pricey presents. His yacht escape was one of those places. After serving as a family vacation boat for brief excursions, Forrest turned it into a private hideaway where he hosted ladies he had met on the app. He was able to avoid unwanted attention since the yacht gave him the privacy he needed. The police eventually learned that the yacht was frequently used for these kinds of meetings from the captain, who was employed by Forrest. He remembered that Forrest sometimes traveled small distances with women or sat with them alone for numerous hours. The captain claimed that this started to happen frequently, but he was prohibited from inquiring because of a confidentiality agreement. Alcohol was frequently consumed during these interactions, and occasionally illegal narcotics were used as well. Conversations regarding obtaining these drugs were discovered in messages on Forrest's phone. Sometimes he asked his partners to bring them along. Unaware of his other existence, his family and co-workers were taken aback by this news. One woman that Forrest had met through seeking arrangement attracted special scrutiny from investigators. He set up a rendezvous with her aboard the yacht a week prior to his passing. They drank alcohol during the evening and then took drugs that made Forrest feel ill. Forrest stated in communications following the meeting that he wasn't feeling well but had no plans to cease doing such things. There were two realms in Forrest's life. In one, he had a perfect reputation as a professional, a loving husband and a father. He looked for excitement and a brief reprieve from regularity in the other. His family thought that his yacht vacations were just a stress reduction strategy, and his acquaintances and co-workers were unaware of this hidden side of him. Forrest viewed these private sessions as a means of relaxing from his rigorous work schedule, but they ultimately had disastrous results. His success was formerly symbolized by the yacht. Freedom became the place where his premature death and double life met. Investigators and Forrest's loved ones were forced to reevaluate their perception of a man they had assumed to be perfect in light of the facts. Alex, whose real name is Alexandra Catherine Tillman, was born in Canada on April 8, 1987. Leslie Ann and Bart Tillman adopted her at a young age, thus her biological parents were unknown. Alex received a secure and caring upbringing from her new family, complete with a cozy home and stable finances. The family enjoyed a high social status because Bart was an executive at a large corporation and Leslie Ann worked in retail. Alex was raised in a loving home. She aspired to be a writer and excelled academically, particularly in literature. Her teachers were aware of her rich imagination and innovative ideas. She also enjoyed playing sports and took an active part in school tournaments. Parents encouraged their daughter's goals, supported her education, and were proud of her. But for Alex, adolescence marked the start of a string of issues. She first took marijuana when she was 14. Although it was more of a haphazard choice, it eventually brought to a slow entry into the forbidden world. Alex started using lighter drugs at first, but by the time he was 16, he was using harder ones. Her life underwent a significant transformation during this time. She started skipping school, avoiding the sports sections, and separating from her parents, Leslie and Bart Tillman, who did everything in their power to support their daughter. They sought the help of psychologists and brought her to counseling, but things kept getting worse. They sent Alex to a private rehabilitation school in Maine in a last-ditch effort to make things better. This school was well known for teaching teenagers with behavioral issues in a severe manner. The parents believed that removing their daughter from her familiar surroundings would aid in her transition back to a regular life. However, the anticipated outcomes of the stay at the institution were not achieved. Unable to adjust to the new surroundings, Alex quickly went back home and resumed her old way of life. Alex had finally left school at the age of 18. She experimented with many paths, such as journalism, but soon lost interest. She struggled with addictions continually, which prevented her from establishing a personal or professional life. Her attempts to achieve were consistently foiled by a return to medicines. Alex relocated to San Francisco in 2010. She wanted to dedicate herself to the entertainment industry in order to begin a new chapter in her life. She started a YouTube account during this time, posting videos about makeup and her daily life. But the initiative didn't work out, and Alex was disappointed. She looked to the modeling world once more in an attempt to make a name for herself, but after determining that the typical requirements for a lucrative modeling career did not apply to her, Alex decided to specialize on fetish photography. She took involved in picture assignments that emphasized provocation and epotage in the BDSM style. Although this decision helped her establish her audience, it did not result in stable finances. Alex was still battling addictions, living in disarray, and dealing with difficulties all the time. Alex started using the Seeking Arrangement website in 2011. This choice gave her access to wealthy men who could support her financially and provide her access to a more opulent lifestyle. This platform introduced Alex to Forrest Hayes. As was common on the platform, they started their connection by talking about the conditions of their meetings. In exchange for financial support and lavish presents, Forrest was looking for a partner to join him for intimate gatherings on his yacht retreat. He offered Alex the opportunity to attain the stability she sorely desired. Their sessions were informal and frequently included light chat and wine, but as investigators eventually found, their encounters soon took on a new dimension. On occasion, Forrest asked Alex to bring illegal drugs to their sessions, and he paid her extra for doing so. Alex accepted, seeing this as a chance to make more money. They started meeting frequently, and the yacht escape became their main gathering spot. Among the important people in Alex Tillman's background was Dean Riopelle, a musician, entrepreneur, and proprietor of well-known nightclubs in Atlanta. Because of their significant age difference, their romance, which started in 2011, immediately attracted attention. Alex was only 24 at the time, while Dean was 51. They both seemed to thoroughly embrace a colorful and intense lifestyle, though, and didn't seem to mind the difference. In addition to being a prosperous businessman, Dean had a strong interest in rock music. His band frequently played at his clubs, which were essential to Atlanta's music culture. Dean was well known for his vivacity, charisma, and passion for an unrestrained lifestyle. Dean took a major role in Alex's life, as she sought both stability and attention. Their relationship reflected the idealized anarchy of rock and roll, wild parties, travel, and a carefree lifestyle. However, there were serious issues underlying their relationship's glitzy exterior. Alex frequently started arguments, according to Dean's friends and co-workers. Their relationship was unstable due to her impulsive behavior, which was made worse by her use of drugs and alcohol. Only a few weeks before to the deadly Forrest Hayes incidents, in September 2013, Alex reported Dean to the police for allegedly being aggressive. Officers discovered a completely different scene when they got there, though. Witnesses reported that Alex had been acting strangely that evening. After drinking too much, she made a scene at one of the clubs and attacked Dean, biting his finger and leaving obvious scars. Alex was thus accused of assault and making a false report. This incident brought to light the persistent strain in their relationship, which was collapsing under the weight of constant disagreement, despite their shared affection. On September 24, 2013, a few weeks later, Dean Riopelle was discovered at his house, unconscious. After a long night of partying, Alex called emergency services to report that he had passed out. She said she had gone into the restroom for a moment and came out to find him on the floor. When paramedics came, they declared him dead at the scene. An autopsy showed that a heart attack caused by an overdose of illegal drugs was the cause of death, but Dean's family and friends had some qualms about this judgment. They maintained that Dean avoided even simple painkillers and had a great dislike of utilizing medications. The official decision about his death seemed contradictory, given his strong position on the issue. Despite their worries, there was insufficient evidence to support foul play. Therefore, the matter was closed. Originally deemed an accident, Dean's death came to light again in 2014, when Alex was taken into custody in relation to the Forrest Hayes case. The police discovered parallels between the two incidents during the inquiry. The drugs that killed Forrest were the same ones that were discovered in Dean's system. The investigation into Dean's death was reopened as a result of this discovery. Suspicions were also heightened by Alex's enigmatic social media posts. She said, "Death is always near," in a post that was shared a few months after Dean's death. You might be surprised to learn how near it is. Although Alex never provided an explanation or clarification, these remarks generated a lot of conjecture. Dean's family backed the case's reopening, claiming that the first probe had been too cursory. They thought Alex might have been involved in his death because of his actions and relationship to illegal substances, but there was never any hard proof that connected her to the event. Investigators suspected that Alex's acts could not have been random events, but rather part of a wider pattern because of the similarities between Dean Riepel's and Forrest Hayes' killings. Nevertheless, Alex's purported involvement has never been confirmed, and Dean's case is still formally closed, despite the increasing attention. This ambiguity keeps raising unanswered questions that might never be resolved. With the use of video records recovered from cameras on the yacht, witness statements, and other pieces of evidence, investigators were able to piece together what happened the night Forrest was discovered dead. As usual, Forrest arrived at the escape in the afternoon on November 23, 2013, and he boarded by himself. Alex Tillman joined him on the yacht shortly after. The captain testified that Forrest had asked the crew to leave the yacht for the night, stating that he wanted some alone and a peaceful night to unwind. The yacht still had several working cameras. In the main cabin, the video showed Forrest and Alex conversing, joking, and sipping wine. Substances and syringes were later found in the backpack that Alex had brought with her. The talk grew more informal as the evening went on, and Alex produced a syringe loaded with a drug. After giving herself an injection, she gave it to Forrest, who accepted. The precise moment of the injection was captured by the camera. Forrest's condition quickly deteriorated after receiving the dose. After losing consciousness, he fell into the couch. At first, Alex failed to see how terrible the situation was. She kept looking about the cabin and drinking her wine. She finally shook Forrest by the shoulders in an attempt to resuscitate him, but he didn't react. Alex became alarmed when he realized that Forrest was not waking up. She started acting frantically. She then scrubbed the wine glass she had used, trying to get rid of lipstick stains, but missing some, while she started to gather her possessions, including the syringes and any leftover chemicals, in an effort to get rid of any possible evidence. She was also seen on camera quickly pulling the cabin's curtains, surveying the area, and making sure there was no obvious sign of her presence left. Alex then departed the yacht without telling anyone what had transpired. Forrest lay on the couch for several hours after she left him asleep, and no one bothered him. The skipper didn't return to the yacht and see Forrest dead until later, after his worried wife had called him. According to the inquiry, Alex attempted to evade notice following the incident by turning off her phone and leaving the marina. But police were able to piece together the events thanks to the yacht's camera recordings, fingerprints, and text messages between Forrest and Alex on his phone, as well as traces of lipstick on the wine glass. Alex played a significant role in the catastrophe, as evidenced by her actions during the escape. She was suspected of trying to avoid responsibility because of her frantic flight and attempts to destroy evidence. One crucial question, though, was still unsolved. Was the injection planned, or was it a snap decision taken under pressure? Law enforcement launched a manhunt to find Alex Tillman when it was determined that she was a major contributor to Forrest Hayes' death. Suspicions that Alex was involved were further cemented when she went into hiding right after the incident. Her phone was off and her once accepted social media profiles were inactive, making it more difficult to find her. But investigators came up with a strategy. They concentrated on Alex's Seeking Arrangement profile, which was the site where she had first made contact with Forrest. The secret to finding her was this app. Investigators constructed the persona of an affluent man looking to make new friends using a fictitious profile. Alex accepted to meet despite his best efforts to stay out of the spotlight because he couldn't resist the chance to make money. She set up a rendezvous at a remote spot in California after days of messaging. Alex was arrested by police enforcement when she showed up for the rendezvous. Everything went without a hitch. Despite not resisting, Alex's behavior throughout the arrest was described as calm and uninterested. She claimed not to grasp the charges against her. She was shortly formally charged with illegally distributing forbidden narcotics, tampering with evidence, and second-degree homicide. Her attractiveness and contentious past caused the trial to immediately become a media sensation. When it started in early 2014, Alex, known as the beauty-turned-criminal, became the focus of media and public attention. During court appearances, a lot of people talked about her previous appearances, interviews, and demeanor. Alex had a composed and self-assured demeanor, frequently wearing immaculate clothing. which elicited conflicting responses from the general population. According to the prosecution, Alex was completely aware of the dangers associated with her behavior. They played camera footage from the yacht that showed her giving Forrest an injection and then walking away without helping him. The prosecution asserted that this showed her lack of interest and willful efforts to hide her activities. Alex's defense team argued that she didn't mean to hurt anyone and that she only did what Forrest asked her to do. Her attorneys claimed that her hasty departure was motivated by panic and that his death was a terrible accident. They further underlined that Forrest had agreed to the injection and had asked for the drugs. There was a great division in public opinion. Some believed that Alex was a heartless criminal who killed a well-known and prosperous person. Others questioned the morality of Forrest's actions, such as his use of a dating site and involvement in dangerous pursuits, and saw her as a victim of circumstance. Alex and the prosecution agreed a plea deal in May 2015. She avoided a jury trial and received a reduced sentence by entering a guilty plea to involuntary manslaughter and possession of forbidden narcotics. She received credit for time already served and was given a 6-year jail sentence. Another round of debate was triggered by the ruling. Given the circumstances, some people thought the punishment was too light, while others thought it was appropriate because there was no concrete proof of intended injury. In 2017, Alex was deported to her native Canada after completing her term. Her name did, however, keep coming up in conversations and stories about well-known crimes. To the general public, Alex Tillman came to represent double lives, dangerous conduct, and the far-reaching effects of careless choices that resulted in a catastrophe that affected a great number of lives. After being freed, Alex tried to start over. She remained out of the spotlight for a while, avoiding social media and media interactions. But a year later, she had her first significant video call interview with a Canadian journalist. To many, Alex seemed collected, serene, and emotionally aloof. Her account of what happened rekindled controversy and sparked fresh discussions about her behavior and the fallout. Alex claimed in the interview that she had never meant to hurt Forrest Hayes and that she was shocked by his passing. She asserted that she was not aware of any prior medical conditions he might have had and that the injection had been given at his request. Alex said she thought Forrest knew his boundaries and had control over his behavior. Additionally, she denied intentionally attempting to conceal evidence, stating that her actions were motivated by panic and ill-advised decisions made in a moment of crisis. However, the evidence in the case contradicted her allegations. Video from the yacht showed Alex leaving the area without trying to contact for assistance, in addition to deleting any record of her presence. Her justifications were criticized harshly by the Forrest family, who saw them as an attempt to deflect blame and cast further doubt on her sincerity. Her comments regarding Dean Riopel were equally contentious. Alex revealed in the interview that his passing had hurt her and that their relationship was tumultuous but sincere. She did not, however, respond to inquiries regarding the circumstances of their last encounter or the reason behind Dean's overdose. Suspicions were only heightened by her silence. According to Dean's family, who had previously demanded that the case be reopened, Alex's remarks left more questions than they answered. It's still unknown how far along the Dean Riopel death investigation is. The Fulton County District Attorney's Office stated in 2018 that the matter was being reviewed, but they did not release any additional information. Rumor has it that investigators failed to find fresh evidence that would support or contradict Alex's involvement. The public was kept waiting for answers, and Dean's family was left in a condition of uncertainty. Alex Tillman currently lives in Canada and keeps a low profile. Her social media accounts are still inactive, and journalists have had varying degrees of difficulty reaching her for additional comments. She continues to be a contentious person who significantly divides opinions despite her modest profile. Others view Alex as a cold, cunning person whose actions led to 2 catastrophes, while others regard her as a person caught in the wrong situation. Many issues remain in the situations of Dean Riopel and Forrest Hayes. Dean, were their deaths really unintentional? What part did Alex really play in these sad incidents? Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Nashville, Tennessee saw a devastating event in March 2020 that had an impact well beyond its boundaries. In addition to upsetting the local community, Holly Williams and William Lanway's tragic deaths sparked a national dialogue on the widespread problems of mental health disorders, domestic violence, and the destructive effects of turbulent relationships. The horrific circumstances surrounding their deaths, the investigation that followed, and the story's wider ramifications for domestic violence awareness will all be covered in this film. More than just a narrative of loss, this one is a potent warning that emphasizes how crucial it is to spot the warning signs of abusive relationships and how urgent it is to get help. Come along with us as we work through the intricacies of their lives and the lessons this tragedy has to offer. 31-year-old Holly Williams was well known for her vivacious demeanor, contagious laugh, and compassionate disposition. She was characterized as a cherished friend, sister, and daughter who made everyone around her happy. Holly's life was full of possibilities, and she had goals and dreams. Beneath her cheerful facade, though, Holly battled relationship issues, especially with her ex-boyfriend William Lanway. Holly, who grew up in Nashville, has strong ties to the area. She was supported through thick and thin by her close-knit family. Friends remembered Holly's love of adventure and her enthusiasm for life. She loved being outside, traveling, and savoring time spent with those she cared about. Sadly, her connection with William would turn out to be a major obstacle, overshadowing her lively personality. Born in 1988, William Lanway had a tumultuous history, filled with unpredictable and violent conduct. A few years before to their untimely deaths, he and Holly started dating. At first, their relationship appeared to be normal, full of the promise and excitement that come with youthful love. But as time passed, their relationship's dynamics started to change. Holly's family and friends observed that William had a history of jealousy and was possessive. There were several breakups and reconciliations as a result of their unstable relationship. Holly tried to put some distance between herself and William, but he found it difficult to accept their breakup, which resulted in increasingly troubling conduct. In their relationship, Holly's loved ones observed indications of emotional abuse. William repeatedly displayed domineering behavior by keeping tabs on Holly's social connections and demanding to know where she was. There were rumors that William was verbally insulting Holly, which made her feel even more alone and afraid. Holly frequently confided in her friends about her difficulties and her worries about William's instability and fury. Understanding the terrible conclusion of their story requires knowledge of the history of domestic abuse in their relationship. The pair had previously been the subject of multiple domestic disturbance calls handled by law enforcement. Holly claimed to have felt intimidated and worried about her safety in these situations. One significant instance occurred in early 2020 when Holly went to the police after William had followed her around and showed up at her house without permission. In violation of her attempts to establish space, he even made repeated attempts to get in touch with her via social media and phone conversations. As William's actions worsened, Holly's worries grew, and she started to worry more about her safety. Holly tried to put herself out of the situation, but she was entangled in a web of intimidation and emotional manipulation. Friends saw that Holly frequently felt bad about leaving William because she was afraid of his reaction and possible injury. She frequently battled the dread of reprisals, which is a typical occurrence for many people in violent relationships. Holly's circumstances become more vulnerable in the days preceding the disaster. Holly was reported missing on March 1, 2020, when she did not come home from a night out with friends. When they were unable to get in touch with her, frightened relatives became concerned for her safety and called the police. The police soon discovered Holly's turbulent connection with William when they started their inquiry. Red flags were raised right away when friends and relatives shared information about Holly's anxieties and previous encounters with William. Given William's violent and domineering past, the authorities were aware of the possible threat Holly posed. Police were notified by a 911 call about a disturbance at a nearby hotel on March 3. According to witnesses, William and Holly got into a furious dispute. Even though the police were called to the location, both people had already departed by the time they got there. This interaction brought to light the growing strain in their relationship. Holly's acquaintances reported that she had been missing for a few days on March 4, 2020. Concern for her safety increased as alarm bells began to ring. In the past, Holly had shared her worries about William with her friends, which made them think that something horrible might have occurred. When a construction worker found an abandoned automobile at a Nashville construction site on March 5, 2020, the inquiry took a disastrous turn. The bodies of Holly Williams and William Lanway were found in the car, which was later determined to be Holly's. It was a somber and startling scene. It was soon established by the authorities that William had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and Holly had been shot several times. The neighborhood was rocked by this finding, which prompted an investigation into what happened before this awful conclusion. It became evident during the course of the investigation that William had killed Holly before killing himself. The terrible effects of a dysfunctional relationship marked by violence and control were brought to light by this sad murder-suicide. Eric, a married man who had been linked with Holly through her escort service under the nickname Lila Love, was a major driving force behind the convoluted web of deceit, treachery, and violence that started the inquiry into the killings of Holly Williams and Bill Lanway. When Holly's boyfriend Bill broke into her escort account and discovered private information about her clients, Eric's life took a terrible turn. Knowing that disclosing his contact with an escort could ruin his marriage and standing in the community, Bill exploited this information to blackmail Eric. Instead of submitting to Bill's demands, Eric turned to Gil, his private security guard, for assistance. Thinking Lila Love was a fictitious name, he first assigned Gil the duty of determining Holly's real identity. But under the pretense of looking into a missing woman, Gil recruited Brian Brockway and his brother Chad, who worked in security as well. Thinking he was assisting someone in need, Chad researched Holly in great detail. As the inquiry went on, it became evident that Eric's problems were not being caused by Holly. He was being extorted for money by Bill. Another security contractor, Adam Carey, finally faced Holly head-on after recognizing the complex dynamics at work. Adam chose to convey messages to Holly and Bill after unraveling the network of blackmail, and on March 11, 2020, he followed Bill to a grocery shop. Eric made a crucial choice that evening after Bill called him, likely to demand more money. Eric gave Adam and Brian permission to murder Holly and Bill if needed. The murders occurred on March 12 in Nashville, where Brian and Adam flew to shortly after. They were seen departing together at around 11:40 p.m. on security footage taken from Holly's residence. Gunshots were heard shortly after departing, and persistent yelling suggested a parking lot ambush. According to the video, Holly was unintentionally shot during the commotion, and Bill was singled out for his blackmailing actions. When Brian and Adam realized Holly was still alive, they shot her once more to be sure she wouldn't live. The killers dumped Holly's car in a landfill after the killings, then drove to Memphis, where Adam dropped Brian off at the airport before heading back to North Carolina. As if the murder for hire were a routine service, Eric inexplicably left a positive evaluation for Gil's security company, Speartip. The FBI looked into Eric's finances more after this internet review raised suspicions, and found that he had paid the murderers almost $1 million, 0 cents. Detectives spent 2 years trying to make sense of a lot of dead ends in the case, since Eric could easily argue that he had hired the security team to look into Holly and Bill's identity rather than to kill them. They were looking for concrete proof that would connect him to the killings. Chad Brockway, who had first helped collect information on Holly without realizing the scope of the investigation, was the person the police chose to speak with. Chad went undercover to get further information after discovering the truth and consented to assist the authorities. When Chad reached out to Adam in his undercover capacity, he was startlingly candid about his readiness to carry out murder for pay. After the conversation verified that Adam was aware of the murder-for-hire procedure, Chad and Brian met at a restaurant while Chad was wearing a wire. After being quiet at first, Brian later boasted about the killings, claiming that he had overpowered Bill and that Adam was eager to kill Holly. This startling discovery exposed the murderers' lack of regret and created a troubling portrait of them. To stop Brian, Adam, and Gil from escaping, the authorities planned their simultaneous arrests on December 10, 2021, but they held off on arresting Eric right away because they wanted hard proof that he planned the killings. Investigators offered Gil a proposal after the 3 guys were taken into custody. He could lessen his own charges if he assisted them. In order to get Eric to disclose his objectives, they came up with a scheme for Gil to phone him and pretend to ask for more money. In passing, Eric stated that he would prefer to completely remove Adam and Brian's threat rather than just pay them off. He gave the police the crucial piece of evidence they needed to charge him when he said they had to be sure they wouldn't be back in 6 months. Shortly after, on his way back from a hunting trip, Eric was arrested. Gil entered guilty pleas to murder for hire, abduction conspiracy, and kidnapping resulting in death. By December 2022, he fulfilled his promise to testify against the other three while awaiting punishment. In November 2023, Eric, Adam, and Brian's trial was held in a tumultuous courtroom, with each defendant having their own attorney. According to their argument, Gil deceived Eric into hiring them, and the killings were accidental rather than the result of planned acts of violence. Gil's thorough evidence, however, refuted their assertions and emphasized that the first goal was only to frighten Bill and Holly. After deliberating for 2 weeks and 7 hours, the jury found Adam and Brian guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit kidnapping that results in death, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Eric was convicted of both conspiracy to conduct kidnapping and conspiracy to commit murder for hire. Hearings are scheduled for 2024, and each could receive a life sentence. Following this tragedy, the people of Nashville came together to support Holly's friends and family. To commemorate Holly's legacy, vigils were conducted during which family members told tales of her generosity, tenacity, and influence on their lives. The community's dedication to increasing awareness about domestic violence was demonstrated by the overwhelming support. By sharing her experience on social media, Holly's family pushed for increased understanding and assistance for victims of domestic abuse. They underlined how important it is for people in comparable circumstances to realize they are not alone and to get help. Discussions concerning the need for better support networks for victims of domestic abuse were sparked by the terrible circumstances surrounding Holly's death. This case was also used by advocacy groups to support training programs that increase public understanding of the warning indicators of domestic violence. To raise awareness of the value of identifying unhealthy relationships and offering assistance to those in need, they planned seminars and events throughout Nashville. Nashville's city government also took action against domestic abuse after Holly's death. They started efforts to give victims access to resources including hotlines, counseling, and legal support. The response from the community showed a dedication to stopping similar tragedies in the future and helping victims of domestic abuse. That concludes our in-depth analysis of Holly Williams and William Lanway's unfortunate story for today. We hope that this inquiry clarifies the intricacies and ramifications of the decisions taken. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. No case, no body. There is no body in our story, but there is a case on a November morning in 2011, which was mentioned in English law following the captain's miracle. 3 years after returning home to her leased apartment on Uboravicha Street in Vladivostok, Galina Kolyadzinskaya vanished. Her parents still think Galina is alive and are waiting for her return in April 2024. Her boyfriend Victor Cohen was found guilty of her murder, although no tangible proof of her purported death was shown at the trial. Following Victor Cohen's release from jail, the matter gathered traction and split the public in two directions. Some people think Victor's sentence for murder was too light, while others think he was sentenced for a crime that never happened. Together, let's learn how a well-known criminal case involving the death and disappearance of an unproven man spread across the nation, sparking debate among onlookers and leading to the formation of organizations to look for Galina. Viktor Polov was born in Vladivostok on July 9, 1988. He adopted Cohen as his last name. When the youngster was very little, his parents split in 2012, leaving his mother and grandma to raise him entirely on their own. He graduated from Far Eastern State University's high school gymnasium in 2005. He enrolled in the PR department at the same university's Institute of Mass Communications, but left after 6 months in 2007. Ilona, who had COVID, presented her sister Galina, who was 3.5 years older than Victor, to her classmate. Galina Kolyadzinskaya was born in Rostov-on April 22, 1985. Her parents relocated to Vladivostok when she was 13 years old. The girl stood out, had a theatricalized way of dress, and was characterized by her brightness. She was slim, intelligent, and highly creative. After completing her education, She attended an art school before enrolling in the Far Eastern Federal University's Faculty of Design. She captured Victor's heart, and he fell deeply in love for the first time. They left their hometown of Vladivostok for Moscow, and Victor abandoned school because they both wanted to enroll at the Theater Institute. Vitya did not fail the entrance examinations, but Galina did. However, he made the decision to go back home in support of his beloved girl, and the two of them moved back to Vladivostok and began living together. Victor found out of his grandfather's passing and the inheritance he had inherited upon his return. The couple decided to use the remaining funds to invest in a successful business after renting an apartment in the heart of the city and purchasing a car each. The young couple was depressed as a result of their unsuccessful attempts to set up a shop for the fabrication of automobile tires, start a chain of donut shops, and even resell church kila. As time went on, the young people's relationship started to fall apart due to conflicts. The furious argument between the couple did not end there. Galina's pals once saw Victor grab his fiancée by the neck during a fight between them. But sometimes Galina did the same. She might break the furniture in their leased apartment or strike her partner. Galina eventually began attending nightclubs more frequently, and Victor developed an interest in other women as a way to escape the issues in his present life. After another trip to the club, Galina was on her way home early on the morning of November 14, 2011. Galina was incensed that Victor was not home, so at 6:43 a.m., she called him and insisted that he come right away. Victor arrived at their leased apartment 15 minutes later. The young folks decided to eventually part ways after a fight broke out between them. Galina sought 300,000 rubles from Victor in exchange for the previously gifted car, after which she would go and stop bothering him. She left the flat, as it turned out, forever after Victor gave her the money. Galina's parents became concerned and began phoning her the following day, but she had turned off her phone. Victor also did not return their calls. He didn't call the girl's mother to inform her of the argument until the second day following Galina's departure. After extorting a substantial amount of money from him, she packed up her belongings and departed. "I'll never be seen by you again. Don't try to find me. Inform my mother that I'm doing well." Victor also told Galina's mother that he repeated what Galina had said in her final words. Galina's parents and friends were not shocked by her abrupt absence, because she was known for her flighty behavior and might go absent for days. He called her after she left, but the girl did not return his calls either, because the phone was initially only switched off. However, 3 days later, the police started looking for Galina Kolyadzenskaya when her father informed them of his daughter's abduction. The matter was enthusiastically taken up by specialists, and Victor was initially called to the station for a discussion. Since he saw Galina last, he was able to address a number of questions throughout the interrogation. Victor said that he had another woman and frequently argued with his girlfriend, whom he had become distant from. Victor claimed that he was tired of his scandalous lover, who could throw her hand at him or slather his car with yogurt when she was envious. Galina once declared while intoxicated that if her opponent kept dating her, she would rip his hair out. "Galina wasn't killed by me. We did argue with her. After packing her belongings and taking all of our money, 300,000 rubles, she departed. Her whereabouts are unknown to me," Victor demanded. The investigating team also looked at both of the young people's automobiles and the apartment where they shared housing, but they were unable to find any evidence of Galina's murder or blood traces. During the questioning, Victor was even put through a lie detector test. Although the young man's evidence was muddled, it was not shown that he was responsible for Galina's disappearance. After questioning Galina's neighbors and acquaintances, the police declined to file a criminal complaint because they could not find any evidence of corpus delicti. But Galina had never been anywhere but Vladivostok. Her passport was not from another country. Victor moved in with his new girlfriend, Tatiana, and began a new life after gathering Galina's possessions and giving them to her parents. Young people's affections were so intense that they made the decision to get married in 2012. Victor finally shed his father's last name, which had burdened him since he was a young boy. His future wife, who heard the lovely last name in one of the films, suggested the Cohen option, which he found appealing. The vanished Galina Kolyadzenskaya was forgotten. For a number of years, a young married couple has been married for 3 years. Cohen flew with great joy. They had a calm and collected life, visited the mountains, and traveled frequently. However, once Galina vanished for 3 years and the case was reclassified as a murder investigation, everything changed. At first, Elena Kolyadzinskaya, Galina's mother, was not overly concerned. She was aware that her creative and erratic daughter could go far based solely on her mood. The fact that no one demanded in June 2014, based on the materials of the inspection of the fact of Galina Kolyadzinskaya's unknown disappearance, that a criminal case under the article of murder be started, may help to explain why the case did not become a criminal case for nearly 3 years. Employees of the Crime Investigation Department started to piece together different explanations for Galina's disappearance after she was placed on the wanted list as missing. These included murder and traveling overseas to work as a model. The police became aware of Kolyadzinskaya's ex-boyfriend as they were figuring out the latter version. As it happened, Cohen and Galina were frequently at odds. His relationship with another lady caused him to feel jealous of the girl. Additionally, it was said that when Galina was younger, she was organizing a trip to Korea. She had previously worked as a model in China and planned to stay in this line of employment. Since he was the last person to see Galina alive, ex-boyfriend Victor Cohen was named as the primary suspect. There was further reason to suspect Victor of being engaged in the crime because of the testimony he and the witnesses had previously provided at different points during the case regarding the circumstances surrounding Galina's disappearance. After being called in for interrogation on July 23, 2014, Victor was arrested and brought to the investigation unit. He admitted there that he had strangled Galina following another argument on the morning of November 14, 2011, then dismembered the body in the restroom, placed the remains in 3 plastic buckets, and transported them to a wooded area close to the Variag factory. There, he built a fire with tires, burned the body, and scattered the ashes in various locations. Throughout the interrogation, Victor Cohen acted with assurance. He cursed a lot and didn't use appropriate language when he spoke to the investigator about you. He related the story of his life, from infancy to the present, in an open and friendly manner. When he sat in front of the police officers with his feet on the ground and grinned, he remembered how he had burned and dismembered his ex-lover Galina. Experienced cops were astounded by his cynicism and calm. He felt untouchable. Victor complained to the investigator that his initial plan was to ground the body in a meat grinder, cook it in a steamer, and then flush it down the toilet. However, he soon gave up on this strategy out of concern that he may be identified and the sewer system would get blocked. He said during the same interrogation that Galina was interfering with his new relationship, so he strangled her. Victor remembered his ex-girlfriend as a unique individual who was an attention seeker. Her fierce temper might produce a huge scandal at home, and she frequently vanished in nightclubs. Galina frequently stated in chats that she would want a lovely life as an escort model, but she also refused to accept the claims that such job is impossible without the supply of intimate services. Up to a certain point, Victor tolerated all of his friend's strange behavior and kept thinking of her as a nice and fascinating individual. I was annoyed during Victor Cohen's grilling. I stood close to the coffee maker. As I stood there, I drank some coffee. I felt something change. There was only this one individual. I went home, went to where she was sleeping, apologized, and began strangling her. She opened her eyes and began to struggle. After choking her for a while, I sobbed and left the house. Fear wasn't the reason, it was loss and frustration. Even though I was aware of what I had done, I remained composed since I am a reasonable person. In November 2011, following the interrogation, the agents brought Victor to his residence with Galina Kolyadzinskaya. That night, Victor showed how he strangled Galina on a folding sofa for an investigation experiment in the flat. He claims that because she was intoxicated and slept off when he was certain she was dead, she did not protest. He hurried out of the apartment and headed to his car, where he devised a heartless scheme to dispose of the body. In India, the bodies of the deceased are burned, and vehicle tires are frequently used in this process to achieve the proper burning temperature. Victor learned about this elaborate method of disposing of the body from a documentary on the country. Victor informed the agents that killing and disposing of the body was considerably simpler than he had anticipated. Victor was brought to the empty lot where he reportedly dumped Galina's body late at night. Cohen had to identify the precise spot on the girl's body where he had set fire to it, in complete darkness. Human rights advocates claim that he was brought to an area devoid of CCTV cameras and traffic, making it impossible to establish his innocence. Important information were also missing from the case, As Victor himself frequently noted, it was unclear how and what he used to carve up the body, because a regular kitchen knife could not be utilized any further. It was unclear how he was able to place Galina's remains in 3 buckets, how he transported them out of the door where everyone could see them, and why no one noticed. The Bygalovs, who rented the apartment to Galina and Victor, were then questioned by the inquiry. When they found out that the cops were in the apartment, they acknowledged that they couldn't get in touch with Victor. They discovered the apartment was empty when they got there to inspect their accommodations. The ceiling was free of occupants and their possessions. They discovered black streaks on the wallpaper, which were probably caused by storing automobile tires, and brown splatters that the couple believed were from coffee or tea. However, Victor Cohen, the captive, was unaware that a video camera was recording his interrogations. He later withdrew his testimony after realizing he had said too much on camera. He claimed that during his interrogation at the Karbasheva Street Operative Investigation Unit, they used illegal interrogation techniques to coerce confessions from him, and that Victor was threatened with harm if his wife Tatiana visited the same station. He went on to say that the operative cops had made up the tale he told during the hour-long interrogation, and that his phone billing from that evening was used to pinpoint the location where the bodies were burned. However, does the CCTV footage from the investigation unit actually show torture? At 6 o'clock in the evening, Tatiana Cohen drove up to the building. She was not permitted inside, so she remained outside. Around 6:30 p.m., Tatiana also entered the facility, and 20 minutes later, Victor was taken in for interrogation. At 6:38 p.m., the questioning began to be recorded. After 8 minutes of torture, he quickly produced a confession and conjured up a vivid, gory tale in great detail. Following the initial court hearing on August 11, 2015, Victor Cohen was found guilty of Galina Kolyatsinskaya's murder. According to the court's August 11, 2015 verdict, he was given a sentence of 9 years and 10 months in prison, which he was to serve in a strict regime penal colony. Tatiana, Victor Cohen's wife, became his most devoted defense attorney after he was accused of murder because she believed he was innocent. Every inhabitant of Vladivostok kept up with the news and even attended Victor Cohen rallies. People separated into accusers and defense. Even after hearing the heartbreaking news that her husband would have to serve nearly 10 years in prison, Victor's wife remained steadfast in her defense and refused to back down. During the court session, the revealing footage that was retained in the criminal case was revealed. Victor claimed that interrogators used torture and threats to get confessions out of him during court procedures, which led to the case becoming well known. Victor was discharged from the hospital with a diagnosis of ear barotrauma and concussion. His lover had been burned, dismembered, and strangled in cold blood by a young, attractive man with large brown eyes. Nobody was able to accept it. A man with charisma could pursue a career in acting. In fact, he was admitted to the Theater Institute of Moscow. Victor refused to study, as we already know, and he was characterized favorably by friends, classmates, and even casual acquaintances. Attorneys based their case on the fact that no human DNA was detected at the location where he burnt the body, or in the flat where the crime was allegedly committed, according to the inquiry. Witnesses even claimed to have seen Galina in the city after she vanished. The public was stoked by Elena Kolyatsinskaya, Galina's mother, who genuinely thought her daughter was still alive. She stated in every interview that Victor was innocent and that Galina would return shortly to explain her disappearance and where she had gone for so long. Victor Cohen argued that the circumstances surrounding the murder that were submitted to the investigators were wholly made up after the guilty verdict. Ultimately, no biological evidence was discovered at the purported location where the victim's remains were burned. Additionally, the forensic analysis of Cohen's residence and vehicle produced unconvincing findings. Additionally, the defendant supported Galina's parents, who believed their daughter was still alive. Ivan Mikolev, the defendant's attorney at the time, claimed that there was no objective evidence in the investigation. Nothing was found when the earth at the clearing where his client is said to have burned the body was examined. There were no biological traces found during the examination. Some of the case materials were later discovered to be missing as well. The lie detector data, camera footage, and inspection reports of the apartment and automobile that were acquired back in 2011 led Cohen's defense team and family to assume that the case had been reclassified to absolve him of guilt for the unsolved homicide. It was never discovered that Galina disagreed with the court's decision. Victor filed an appeal and started arguing that he was not a party to the incriminating crime and that the police had coerced him into making the confession. Tatiana Cohen started a massive campaign to defend her husband. She actively maintained social networks, participated in protests, and made appearances on a variety of talk shows and programs. In exchange for posting false information, she actively raised money for a lawyer. The case was sent to the Court of First Instance for a second trial in a separate court after the Court of Appeals rejected the verdict on December 7, 2015, citing violations of the Code of Criminal Procedure. Victor Cohen was also found guilty of Helena Kolyadzinskaya's murder following the Court of First Instance's retrial. As a result of the June 21, 2016 judgment, he was given a sentence of 9 years and 9 months in jail, with the option to do his time in a severe regime colony. Victor Cohen served his term after the Court of Appellate Instance upheld it on November 28, 2016, despite the fact that the conviction had been challenged once more. Following the appeal, Tatiana remarried, divorced Victor, and stopped having any affairs. It came out that her position as a wife was a well-planned game, since Tatiana started seeing someone else right after Victor was arrested. This was not what everyone had anticipated. Tatiana declined to respond. The court decided even though Helena Kolyadzinskaya's body was not located. Victor Cohen was duped based on circumstantial evidence, and there was a lot of it. First, Victor's confession, in which he states that he chose to grind the body in a meat grinder in order to dispose of it after the murder. In 2015, he went to the Maxim shopping complex and actually purchased a meat grinder and a pressure cooker at the Technica Dome store. Records from the store's database pertaining to meat grinder purchases made on November 14, 2011, were seized as part of the investigation, and among them was the last name Polavavi. The time on the invoice and the receipt from the store's database match. Additionally, the store administrator attested in court that the database was not altered with the intent to fabricate information. Furthermore, the verdict was significantly influenced by Victor Cohen's cell phone bills. Victor remained in the apartment from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. on November 14, 2011, probably dismembering the body and transporting it in buckets to the woods close to the Varyag facility at night. Victor kept saying that after Galina departed, he contacted her, but her phone was unreachable. Victor last spoke with Tatiana on the phone at 11:51 p.m., right outside the Varyag facility. Victor's phone bill, however, indicated that he did not call Galina between 10 a.m. and night. Furthermore, it's clear from listening to the court proceedings when Galina Kolyadzinskaya and Victor's billing is disclosed that, following Galina's disappearance, she received calls from friends, family, and even Victor's mother, but not from Victor. If it were Victor, someone would at least convey a message to his missing friend, especially because everyone is searching for Galina and Victor is suspected. Victor, however, didn't. He knew, of course, that there would be no response. Sales receipts for 320-liter plastic buckets with locks and lids that were purchased on the same day as the meat grinder were also included in the case. Sadly, the receipts don't include a last name, so it can't be confirmed that Victor Cohen purchased them. However, how could Galina fit into buckets that held 320 liters? The enamel found in the bathroom was another piece of circumstantial evidence. Galina was dismembered in the bathtub by Victor, who then used a metal brush to scrub the tub so hard that he obliterated the enamel after covering everything with foil to conceal the bloodstains. Victor claimed in the confession video that Galina had damaged the bathtub's enamel by frequently using acidic or alkaline cleaning solutions. Following her disappearance, witnesses who said they saw Galina at Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow and at a shop in Vladivostok were later proven to be untrue. CCTV footage from the airport shows that no such girl was discovered. One of the witnesses was the subject of a criminal case under the article on giving false testimony. My only and primary concern when researching this case was why no additional clues were discovered. Even the slightest details are impossible to foresee and conceal. After all, there must be some evidence left if Victor killed Galina. The response was straightforward. Victor refused to allow the police to enter his apartment over the first few days. He moved in with Tatiana right away, and the apartment's owners were unaware of the situation. It wasn't until December 8 that he finally took his possessions. When the policemen arrived to see how he was doing, nobody opened the door. It took 12 days for the cops to enter the residence. Instead of using luminol, they just made things right. The apartment's owners began remodeling on December 10. Only on December 27th were the two vehicles examined. Remind yourself that on November 14, Galina vanished. Victor thus had a month and a half to clean the car's interior and roughly 3 weeks to clean the flat and hide his tracks. Therefore, why were neither Galina's remains nor DNA traces discovered? Experts have concluded that, under artisanal conditions, it is still conceivable to completely burn the person, which is precisely what occurred in this instance. Wild animals may have scattered the black fragments Victor claimed to have scattered in the forest close to the burning site, depriving the inquiry of the final piece of evidence. Galina was dismembered and placed on tires, where Victor set the fire at the proper temperature to burn the bones. Black pieces of burnt bone were all that remained of her. Citing the length of time that had passed, he did not mention the precise site of the campfire. He had simply forgotten. We would need to use a sieve to sort through a sizable portion of the forest in order to locate the body's remains. However, why? Nothing is known about Helena Kolyatchinskaya if the murderer is not apprehended for almost 13 years. The statements of the man found guilty of her murder recount the final day of her life. Where may Galina have gone if Victor Cohen hadn't killed her in the first place? It is nearly impossible to become lost in today's environment unless you are a professional in the intelligence service, according to seasoned, retired investigators who spoke casually with journalists. Galina had to be located in 13 years. She could not avoid leaving traces, even if she lived abroad under a phony identity. She would have been identified as she would have needed to be fingerprinted, even to replace her documents. Victor Cohen claims to have been tortured and married someone else, but he never once says that Galina will return, that he is waiting for her, or that she will prove his innocence. He is fully aware that the primary witness is not present and cannot be. Victor never once claimed that he was innocently imprisoned, that 10 years of his life had been taken from him, or that his cherished wife, Tatiana, had left him because she didn't want to wait for him there. He has no resentment of the system, no desire to defend his honor, and no intention of suing to establish his innocence. He is aware that no one will ever find the body. He destroyed it with fire. No proof exists. He acts as though he has done time for his crime, and this allows him to fabricate all these tales of the disappearance. He's clean now. What are the possible claims? He served time after being found guilty. Everything has been redeemed by him. Even in such detail, an innocent individual would not be so heartless as to implicate himself. Many people nationwide are still in shock at what transpired. Even though the case has now been concluded, they are continuing searching independently for Galina. Because Galina's parents are still hoping for daughter to return home, they utilize forums to advertise and occasionally share pictures of girls who look a lot like her. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. This video shows 47-year-old Fiona Beale, a primary school teacher at Eastfield Academy in Northampton, dancing sloppily in front of the pupils. Every one of her pupils enjoyed having her as their instructor. She was a committed educator who wished to make the most of her students' school time. Nobody in this video has yet to comprehend that Fiona's tale will be featured on newspaper front pages in a few months. We will thus talk about the events that took place in England in 2021 today. The details of Fiona Beale's early years are scarce. She was a lovely and amiable woman who liked her work and her students, according to many who knew her. She lived in Northampton, which is roughly 60 miles northwest of London, with her partner Nicholas Billingham, 42. According to the 2021 census, the total population of the urban area is close to 250,000, making it one of the biggest towns in England. Moore Street was the residence of Nick and Fiona, and it was on this peaceful street that the events of today took place. They spent 17 years together. Naturally, Fiona and Nick experienced highs and lows like any other couple. Here's what I know about Fiona and Nick's connection, though many facts will likely be revealed later as this case was concluded approximately 2 weeks ago. According to Leslie Oldham, who knew the couple well, I thought she was really nice. Leslie remembered that although they weren't holding hands or smitten, they appeared content enough. She was quite courteous and talkative when Nick invited her around for tea. You never knew how long a relationship would continue with Nick, because he was always a little of a ladies' man and liked being pampered by women. When Nick and Fiona became infected with a virus that was then circulating the globe in November 2021, their love ended. After testing positive for the virus, Fiona and Nick had to separate themselves, she told her loved ones, on November 1, 2021. All they needed to do was complete an online application and spend 10 days at home, but she texted her sister the very following day to let her know that Nick had broken up with her and gone out with someone else. It's crucial to remember that it happened in early November 2021. Nicholas Billingham remained in contact with his friends and family after splitting from Fiona Beale. He sent his mother a text message claiming that he had fled with Faye. He claimed to be content and to have a wonderful new life. After 10 days at home, Fiona went back to work after her recuperation. When she returned to work, co-workers who had learned about the breakup gave her a lot of encouraging comments. But many saw that she was affected by the separation with Nick. Nearly 4 months after splitting with Nick, at the end of February 2022, her mental health started to decline. She could no longer live in a home that made her think of Nick all the time. She thus relocated to Cumbria, which is roughly 200 miles away from Northampton. Her family members were alarmed by the text she sent them on March 15, 2022. Her relatives phoned the police because they were so concerned. Police discovered Beale gravely hurt in a bath at a Lake District property she was renting while doing a welfare check. Constable Josh Parkin spoke in court about how he first thought she was dead and how ominous music was coming from her cell phone. According to Parkin, "I saw a female laying in the bath, completely naked. It looked like bodily fluids in the bath, leading me to believe the individual was deceased. What I would describe as sinister acoustic music was playing from a mobile phone that was next to her. I immediately requested an ambulance to attend our location. I suggested that we tried to get her out of the bath to perform CPR. She then roused and became somewhat conscious. I pulled quite violently on her ear to try and get a pain response. She moaned and went to turn over in the bath. We sat her up, and that's when she started to become emotional. I discovered a blue notebook that was leather-bound and had a logo of some kind on the front. The fact that the paper and the parting note were identical at the time held significance for me. It was evident from a cursory glance at the notebook that it contained information about her mental health at the time. I remembered that the last page of the book mentioned both vomiting and defecating. At the time, I believed it to be essentially a continuation of the farewell note. Fiona left a second message for the home's owner along with her bank card. The message read, "This is my PIN, don't go into the bathroom." Fiona was taken to the hospital by ambulance, and as the doctors treated her, the cops took a closer look at her notebook. They discovered something evil there. Constable Lawson rejected the notes as ramblings, even though they seemed to describe Beale killing someone. He also stated that he did not think anyone had been killed at that point. The notes seemed to be ramblings, he claimed. In a statement, Constable Roy Williams, a colleague, stated that he too thought the notes were ramblings, but that there were some extremely unsettling elements. I believe these comments to be a delusional fantasy, as Beale appeared to be having a mental health episode. Because of the book's substance, we were unable to overlook the statement. She said her long-term partner was not a very nice man, and that she had killed him. Fiona wrote in her notebook, "Everything changed last year. You be sweet to them, especially your wife. My husband wasn't sweet to me. I suppose I ought to explain what happened to get me to this point. My mental health had been deteriorating. Whenever he was cheating, he would up the ante on belittling, moaning, and criticizing. I have to confess. Okay, here goes. October 2021. He spat on me and threatened me during intimate contact. I thought about leaving, but the things he said and did fueled my dark side. I call her Tulip 22. She's reckless, fearless, and efficient. Ruthless. I started plotting as Tulip 22 after he'd gone to bed. I could no longer sleep in the bed due to my breathing being too loud, or I moved too much, or I was snoring. Another notebook entry mentioned that Nick had been nasty and mean for 17 years, and that she decided she couldn't let him get away with it because of his disgusting behavior on Halloween. Another entry stated, "That night I planned pandemic rules, meant I had a guaranteed 10-day isolation period from positive symptoms. I called the school administration on Monday and said we'd tested positive and had symptoms. He went to work. Tulip 22 smoked and planned. I'd planned it mentally so many times before. I had a bath. I left the water in. I encouraged the bath with the incentive of intimate contact. Afterwards, while he was in the bath, I kept the knife in my dressing gown pocket and then hid it in the drawer next to the bed. I brought a chisel, bin bag, and cable ties up too. She made him put on an eye mask before stabbing him, according to the note. The notes that followed read, "Still, my actions haunt me. I sometimes have to catch myself and remember what I did and then remember my cover story." Neither seemed convincing. I got him to wear an eye mask. It was harder than I thought it would be. Hiding a body was bad. Moving a body is much more difficult than it looks on TV. I am sorry I didn't leave him. I am sorry I let him rip my self-esteem and self-worth apart. I am sorry. I am weak. I am sorry for what I did. Yes, I am alive currently, but it's more like a waiting room. People will blame my mental health. I should have, could have fixed myself. Do I regret what I did? Of course I do. I'm not a monster. It had been building up for so long. The funny thing is that he was such an unlikable person, I only had to send a few texts. No one seemed bothered. I don't think anyone would have looked for him. Beale had written in her journal that Billingham why she stabbed him. Recall that Nicholas Billingham vanished on November 1, 2021, and he only used text messages to communicate with his loved ones after that. The police visited Fiona Beale's residence on Moore Street, where she and Nick resided, the day after they finished reading her notebook. In their hasty inspection, they found nothing out of the ordinary, but when they came back the following day, they discovered a few things, such as a mattress in the cellar that was noticeably covered in blood when it was moved. More evidence was discovered when the police returned to Moore Street on March 19. A body was discovered buried in the backyard by forensic investigators and specialized search teams, which included a cadaver dog. Buried beneath bark, chippings, soil, wooden sheeting, concrete building blocks, bricks and planks, plastic bags, rubble, mortar, polystyrene, laminate flooring, and pieces of fabric and vinyl recovered from a constructed structure concealing the body. Billingham's remains were discovered wrapped in carpet. The eyes were covered with a sleep mask. On the inside, the words, "This is my morning after face," were printed. According to the police spokesperson, he was not given any dignity or opportunity to die because of the way he was wrapped in cables, hose pipes, plastic bags, and construction debris. It displays complete disdain. One day after the body was found, a post-mortem was performed. It has been determined that he was killed by a single stab wound to the right side of his neck, which cut the esophagus and trachea and crossed the right jugular vein. Moderate force would have been needed for this. It is impossible to rule out severe force. Fiona Beale was taken into custody by the authorities on March 22, 2022, and accused with killing Nicholas Billingham. When Nick's family learned of his passing, they were crushed. Fiona's use of Nick's phone to text them and his buddies startled them. One of these texts was shown to reporters by Nick's mother, Yvonne Valentine. "Nick has been taken from us far too early and will always be in our hearts," said Nick's family in a statement. "We've been overwhelmed with offers of kind support and words of comfort from so many beautiful people, and know that he will be sadly missed by all his friends, family, and loved ones. Our heart aches for Nick. He was a gorgeous little boy, and we have so many cherished memories of him growing up, and we're so proud of the man he became." Fiona Beale's co-workers and her students' parents were shocked to hear that the adored teacher had a darker side. "We are particularly mindful of the impact this news will have on the children, and we'll be doing everything we can to support both pupils and staff as we work through this difficult time together. This is an appalling tragedy that will shake our school community to its roots, and it's at times like this that we must rally around each other, support each other, and be kind to each other." The administration of the school where Fiona worked issued a statement saying, "We were shocked and saddened to hear that one of our teaching staff has been charged with a very serious offense and is now remanded in custody." Nick passed away on November 20, 2021, after the police began their investigation. In the days that followed, Fiona made every effort to conceal any evidence of the crime she had orchestrated. Fiona understood that by informing everyone that she had the virus, she would have 10 days to avoid being bothered. She allegedly falsified the test results in order to complete an online application form. Fiona never took the test, according to the evidence. She claimed to be suffering from the crippling effects of the virus following the murder, yet her conduct during those 10 days were incongruous with those symptoms. Using her deceased partner's and subsequently her own Amazon account, she purchased a number of cleaning supplies, including for Venetian blinds, a new mop and bucket, ultra-heavy-duty bin bags, a new mattress, bedding, clothes, wall art, and mirrors. The cleanup began as early as 1:07 a.m. on November 2. She added 3 rolls of duct tape to a Tesco order that included many cleaning supplies later that same day. She bought a stainless steel digging shovel, heavy-duty long gardening gloves, a galvanized incineration bin, garden leaves, and a wood burner at 2:19 p.m. She eventually purchased other items to dispose of the body, as well as numerous items for her personal comfort and delight, including apparel, scented candles, shampoos, chocolates, and soft furnishings. Fiona went shopping nearly 2 weeks after killing Nick. On November 13, she was seen purchasing a variety of goods from supermarket cameras, including building supplies that she would later use to construct a cemetery. The cops revealed the CCTV footage. As I mentioned before, Fiona spent several months texting Nick's friends and family in an attempt to pass for him. She also extended an invitation for Nick's mother to come see her. On December 23, 2021, as her son was buried in the backyard, Ms. Valentine recounted how Beale invited her to her house for a Christmas drink. "You moved the furniture to obscure views to the garden. Why? To stop anyone seeing where you had buried my son. You sat in your front room with me, having a casual chat with me, having a Christmas drink with me, and the whole time you knew that you had killed my son and buried him only feet from where I was sat." Ms. Valentine said in her victim impact statement that Beale continued to go about her personal life and work as usual, showing no signs of depression or trauma. There was evidence to the contrary. She was enjoying what she referred to as a new life in one of her erased files, after killing a partner she no longer liked and likely suspected of having an affair. Fiona Beale first protested her culpability during the trial, but she eventually acknowledged that she killed Nick, saying it was an involuntary crime. The prosecutor, however, thought otherwise. He said during the trial that during their 17-year romance, Nicholas Billingham had cheated on Beale with other women. Despite leaving the defendant a few times, Nicholas Billingham always came back to her, and she welcomed him. He stated, "One of the women he slept with became pregnant and gave birth to his child. Instead of leaving him, she worked out a plan on how and when to kill him, where to conceal his body, how to cover up and explain his disappearance to others, and to explain her own absence from work when she killed him." However, defense lawyer Andrew Wheeler informed the jury in a brief statement read following the prosecution's opening argument that Beale had suffered from mental health issues for years prior to the murder, as a result of Mr. Billingham's coercive actions. Beale's attorney, Wheeler, continued, "We submit that in fact this case is not as straightforward as the prosecution suggests. Miss Beale is 49 years of age. She is a lady of good character, a partner to Nicholas Billingham for some 17 years, a hard-working and thoroughly liked schoolteacher. In essence, a lady about whom you will hear many good things as you listen to the evidence." Wheeler next asked the jury, "How does that person go on to kill? There is no dispute in this case that she unlawfully killed Nicholas Billingham. What this case is really about is her state of mind. You will hear that she has, over the years, struggled with her mental health. As you will hear, the defense lawyer described Nicholas Billingham as psychologically controlling and wearing her down over time. She was worn down till she was practically broken over the years. We surrender to you." Many of the specifics of the actual act itself are difficult for Fiona Beale to remember. The teacher continued to work as usual, even traveling to London with the class, according to the court. However, Beale started messaging the head teacher frequently to claim she was sick a few weeks after her capital visit. When the worried head teacher called Beale's mother after receiving the texts in March, she disclosed that Beale had informed her that she was leaving on a school residential trip. After that, the head teacher reported her missing to the police. She was located by Cumbrian police at a rental address close to Kendal. But Beale informed the officer that she didn't want her family to know her precise whereabouts and that all she needed was some peaceful time. Fiona Beale eventually modified her initial statement and completely accepted her guilt. but not before Beale sent a message to her family saying, "I'm so sorry, I love you all very much." The officer then sent the message to Beale's mother, and 3 days later, they went to the lodge. She then described her personal and professional life to the jury at Northampton Crown Court, claiming that Billingham had made cleaning a major point of contention between them and had thrown a dinner plate against a wall twice. Beale said that she was administered antidepressants while attending college. She claimed that when they first started dating, Billingham, who was working as a builder with his stepfather, was incredibly kind and considerate. Little by little, Billingham had changed. "I remember when we were in a flat," Beale said in the opening statement to the court. "I had left a cloth with cleaner on it, and it stained a worktop. It didn't seem really serious, but then cleaning became a huge issue throughout the years, and rather than laughing things off, I would get told off." Beale also mentioned that everything had to be exactly how her partner wanted it during mealtimes. Beale said, "I couldn't tell you when it started. It just got worse, and it lasted till the end. Items placed in cupboards had to be placed facing outwards. While there were a couple of occasions when he threw a plate of dinner at the wall, I lost a lot of confidence. It started with joking that I wasn't doing something, and then it just crept into being nasty about it." She also revealed that prior to killing Nick, she had threatened to kill him so that he couldn't do to another woman what he did to her. Nick's mother, Yvonne, spoke after the guilty plea, saying it was painful to know that her son's killer offered her a drink as he was buried a few feet away. "How you could hate someone that much to do what she did. I can't believe it," and apparently, his last word was "why" when she stabbed him in the neck. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Have you ever pondered the lengths people will go to in pursuit of love? However, what if that love turns out to be something else? What if everything you see is a carefully constructed web of deception and manipulation, and the protagonist of this tale is enmeshed in his own fantasies? The multi-millionaire from Wales, who appeared to have it all, ended up trapped in his own delusions, which caused him to let his life descend into a nightmare and bring down those around him. There are no simple solutions in this tale, and you'll be astounded to see how deeply feelings and passions drove events to a terrible conclusion. The Welsh tycoon and multimillionaire Peter Morgan, who was once at the pinnacle of his success and had unimaginable fortune, was suddenly on the verge of catastrophe. Pay great attention to every detail, because there is significantly less truth to this story than you might imagine. His life, which appeared to be full of wealth and perfect harmony, concealed behind its facade the darkness that frequently engulfs people going through a midlife crisis. A crisis that upends routine and forces a person to grasp at the opportunities they lost in their youth, ultimately leading them down a perilous path. This tale opens on a peaceful Welsh morning, in the traditional way that it was used as a haven for those looking for comfort behind its fortified walls. One woman admitted that her lover, who had previously made her happy, had turned into nothing more than a source of annoyance as they sat on a sofa in a hut nestled in the thick forest, revealing their secrets. She was about to make a choice that would alter everything. A man, meanwhile, was sitting at his house miles away, gripping his cell phone. His trembling fingers seemed to be an attempt to cling to what little tranquility he still had. He had heard words that would change his life forever only a moment before. Born in 1962 on a 300-acre farm close to Newport, Peter Morgan has a long history of achievement and wealth. This narrative took place in Wales in 2016. His family was financially secure when he was growing up. He realized early on that his future was predetermined. He would follow in his parents' footsteps and become a farmer. Even yet, Peter displayed characteristics of entitlement and disinterest in learning. He had a simple picture of his life and never dreamed of venturing beyond the known bounds. He left school at the age of 16 to work in the family business, which turned out to be a reliable source of money even though he had no official schooling. For many years, Peter's life was predictable. He married a childhood friend, worked on the farm, and settled down with his 2 kids in the small town of USK. For a while, Peter was content with the security and comfort of family life, But on his 30th birthday, he made the decision to turn his life around. He left the farm to start his own business, which was very profitable, despite not being very exciting. His network of industrial chicken houses began with poultry barns. The business prospered, and Peter sold it for 7 figures by the time he was 40. This turned out to be a pivotal moment in his life. Although the midlife crisis arrived subtly, its consequences were severe and swift. It seemed as though Peter had suddenly changed from a reasonable businessman to a man who was driven to experience life in all its ferocity and disorder. He started spending money like there was no tomorrow, purchasing expensive vehicles like Lamborghinis and Ferraris, and furnishing his newly purchased estate with ostentatious accessories like a helicopter and a tank. It soon became clear that he was fascinated by weaponry. He had an AK-47 on the desk in his office, but that was just how it looked. Financial excess was only one aspect of the changes in his life. Peter initially stepped over the line when he paid a performer for an intimate service at a private club, while on a business trip to Amsterdam. He woke up and felt compelled to continue after this, which was his first act of infidelity. Peter lived a double life from that point on, one that was characterized by stability and family, the other by luxury and the indulgence in forbidden pleasures. At a VIP club in 2011, Peter's life changed when a friend introduced him to an app that allowed him to reserve top escorts. His demise began with this exchange of words. After returning home, Peter immersed himself in the virtual world where his dreams came true. Morgan soon made it a point to never see the same lady twice, so he spent all of his free time looking through profiles and setting up encounters with escorts all over the nation. From Newport to Cardiff, every encounter was different and special. Cleverly disguising it as work travel, it was his own escape from his family life. Helen, his wife, had no suspicions. Peter had mastered the art of hiding his activities by claiming that his trips were necessary for work, and Helen, perhaps preoccupied with her own obligations, was unaware that her husband was leading a double life. In the year 2000, everything changed. At the age of 12, Peter met a young, vivacious woman named Georgina Simmons on his 50th birthday. Georgina was born into a household of 3 boys and grew up in Newport. She was confident, headstrong, and had a strong personality. At 16, she left school, found work at a call center, and enrolled in cosmetology classes at the same time. The connection between Georgina and Peter Deem, a guy 6 years her senior. School first appeared to be a dependable route to a secure future. But when she gave birth to her daughter Emily at the age of 17, her life started to change. She attempted to adapt to her new job as a mother, but she soon met Peter Morgan, who would fundamentally alter her life. As a young mother, Georgina Simmons attempted to fit in at Peter's mother's home, where they shared a small daughter. She had just enough money from her job at a contact center to scrape by, and she woke up every morning in the dingy, unwelcoming dwelling. She was aware that she wanted more. She firmly believed that she was entitled to greater things, including more money, freedom, and excitement. She was tired of spending her days in a stuffy office on the phone, and she yearned for something more, something that would give her life purpose and luxury. Georgina's boyfriend, Pete, was a quiet, homely man who didn't like for parties or a flamboyant lifestyle. She frequently grumbled about their meager income and how they had to make compromises on everything as a result. He was happy with routine and stability, unlike Georgina, but his longing for a peaceful, uncomplicated life made her feel stuck and unable to see a way out. Georgina made the decision to make a living by using her looks. The young lady almost developed an obsession with her appearance. She started wearing provocative clothing, playing around with cosmetics, and exploring the potential of cosmetic surgery. She soon had liposuction, 2 breast augmentation procedures, and burlesque and exotic dance classes. A world with unrestricted financial flow became possible as a result. She began earning amounts she had previously only dreamed about while working at a private dance club. She made the decision to undergo a whole makeover in order to draw the interest of rich guys who could afford to hire her. Her life began to alter at this point. Eventually, Georgina and Pete were able to leave his mother's house and move into their own apartment. She also thought she had at last acquired some independence for a while. However, it was insufficient. Her aspirations and desire for luxury increased daily. She started thinking about becoming a high-end escort after her job at the club failed to meet her needs, which she rationalized to herself as a means of providing her daughter with a better future. Under the alias Hannah James, she signed up for a well-known app that charged high prices for a variety of services. Georgina was correct when she predicted that her skills and appearance would draw in wealthy clients. Pete opposed the idea, even though he was aware of Georgina's ambitions. He didn't want his spouse to do such work because he was aware of the dangers associated with those kinds of interactions. But he had to make a compromise since he loved Georgina and was afraid of losing her. In exchange for keeping their love secret from their families, the pair consented to an open relationship, enabling Georgina to carry on with her escort business. Only a few clients had access to her private life and services, which were kept under wraps. When Peter Morgan, a multimillionaire going through a midlife crisis, came across Georgina's photo on the app in May 2012, her profile became viral. He was enthralled right away and set up a meeting. As Peter and Georgina ate dinner together on their first date and engaged in light conversation, Peter felt a connection he had been lacking. Her confidence as well as her appearance drew him in. He paid her $200, 0 cents, for a kiss that night, but by morning the sum had increased dramatically. For Peter it was more than work, but for Georgina it was simply labor. Peter preferred variety and had never met the same woman twice before, but Georgina was different. Their encounters went from once a month to once a week, and he was prepared to repeatedly pay for her time. Peter became aware that he was in love with her. Money was no longer a concern and he enjoyed being with her. He was paying for her business as well as her services. Morgan lavished her with presents, clothing, shoes, pricey jewelry, and even a red Ferrari while they were out to eat and watch movies together. Over time, his emotions started to develop into an obsession. As much as possible, Peter wanted Georgina by his side. She was more than just an escort to him now. She was a companion, something his wife and kids would never leave. Peter paid Georgina $10,000, 0 cents, to stay with him for the weekend, not realizing that another woman was spending time with him in their family home. Helen, Peter's wife, was unaware that the events unfolding in her bedroom could cause their marriage to fall apart. It was all business to Georgina. It didn't interest her. Despite Peter's increasing fixation on her, all attention was on the lavish amount of money he spent. Without showing any regret, she kept seeing other clients. Even her boyfriend Pete stayed in her life in spite of her relationship with Morgan. This didn't stop Peter, though. He chose to give Georgina greater exclusive rights, since the one thing that disturbed him was the idea of other clients spending time with her as well. The concept of sharing her was intolerable. Georgina accepted that Morgan was willing to spend a huge amount of money on her being his only partner. She was aware that one client may bring in more money than dozens of others. From that point on, Georgina only saw Peter, who was earning about $133,000, 0 cents, a month. This sum paid for her personal expenses, food, and living expenses. Although it appeared that everything was under control for a while, their agreement was about to set off a series of events that would permanently alter their lives. For Georgina and her daughter, the old mansion, which seemed cut off from reality, turned into a sort of jail. Intoxicated by his wealth and power, Peter Morgan thought he had complete control over his new princess's life. Since the main house was too dilapidated, he moved Georgina into a small bungalow on the estate's grounds, claiming it was for her and her child's safety. As part of their agreement, Morgan made sure her boyfriend Pete Dedium was not allowed to enter the property at all, which effectively isolated Georgina. This isolated existence in an opulent environment continued for 3 years. Peter made every effort to fabricate a fantasy of a fairy tale for Georgina, including lavish holidays in South Africa, expensive presents, and trips to London and other cities. He made it a point to spend as much time with her as he could, and paid for her beauty procedures. Georgina had evolved into more than an escort in his mind. She was like family. Peter was utterly engrossed in his fantasy as they drove ATVs throughout the estate, watched movies, walked along well-kept trails, and enjoyed private moments. However, beneath all of this apparent luxury, fissures were starting to appear. Even though she lived in a castle, Georgina continued to carry out her tasks without showing any affection for Peter, treating him as merely a client. Her boyfriend, Pete Deem, was able to visit her less frequently the more time she spent with Morgan. He tried to alter the situation as he battled her absence and the widening gap between their worlds. Pete started concentrating on improving himself, working out and trying to look more attractive to Georgina. He upgraded his wardrobe with designer clothes, lost weight, and even whitened his teeth in the hopes of regaining her attention. But the truth was far harsher than he had expected. Helen, Peter's wife, meanwhile, began to suspect that anything was up. She had long disregarded her husband's dubious business travels, but when she found a receipt for flowers sent to a different woman, everything changed. She was aware that her husband had been cheating on her for a while, but rather than addressing him, she further distanced herself by going about her everyday business. She appeared to be happy with this arrangement, or maybe she just didn't want to become involved. Georgina started calling her lovers Rich Pete and Poor Pete at the same time, obviously preferring the former. Pete was humiliated by this moniker, which made him feel even less successful. Despite being surrounded by luxury, life in the castle remained detached from the outside world. While her daughter was growing up apart from her father, Georgina spent days and nights with Morgan. Her relationship with Pete disintegrated totally during this time, but Georgina remained unconcerned, seeing Morgan only as a source of money. Peter paid extra costs, totaling thousands of dollars for each session with Georgina. This made it possible for Georgina to continue living a luxury lifestyle. She began inviting other ladies into the castle to keep things interesting, and Peter enjoyed the extra thrill this brought. Though he insisted that she continue to be his primary companion, he frequently asked Georgina to meet new ladies since he enjoyed these scenarios. Peter once invited Georgina and one of her escort pals to his family home while his wife and children were on vacation. They spent the evening having a good time in the marital bedroom. Morgan, however, desired more. In order to fulfill his dream of a trio consisting of his wife Georgina and himself, he asked one of the women to wear Helen's clothing. He was aware that Helen would never consent to such a situation in practice, but it didn't stop him at the time. Peter was unaware that Georgina was recording everything as his fantasy came to life. She captured every moment of the night, from her friend changing into Peter's wife's clothes to everything that happened in the bedroom. Later on, the sequence of events would be significantly influenced by this footage. While the affair went on, Morgan's life started to fall apart. Pete Deem, Georgina's first boyfriend, had had enough. The fact that his partner was spending more time with Morgan than with him and their daughter was becoming intolerable to him. The first breach in Georgina's existence came when he made the decision to break up with her. Helen found out shortly after Peter's wife did. When she unintentionally discovered texts between her husband and Georgina, she realized how serious the infidelity was and made the decision to cease ignoring it. Helen would no longer listen to Peter's explanations, even if he was confessing everything. She demanded a sizable portion of their assets when she filed for divorce. In a short period of time, Georgina experienced two catastrophes that she was unable to recover from. The first was when her father committed suicide in the middle of 2015. She was totally devastated by the incident, and before she could move past that loss, she experienced yet another catastrophe. After their split, her ex-boyfriend Pete Deem also committed suicide because he was unable to handle living without Georgina and their daughter, and had fallen into a deep melancholy. He was discovered hanging in a wooded area in November 2015. The last straw was these incidents. Georgina, who was once powerful and self-assured, plunged into a deep sadness. Alcohol and illegal drugs became her friends. She was drawn into a darkness that seemed unbreakable as her life began to fall apart because she was unable to cope with the loss and the suffering. As time went on, Peter and Georgina's friendship soured. She ignored his efforts to maintain their relationship and started to coldly separate herself. In her heart, Georgina held him accountable for her ex-partner Pete's passing. She believed that he was the one who had destroyed her life, so she turned to another man, a longtime friend she had known for years, for solace. Their relationship began to develop as she felt liberated from pressure and control in his company. For Georgina, it was a chance to break free from Morgan's control and experience real care and support. But this new man's presence made me quite uneasy. Georgina was considered his property by Peter Morgan, who refused to let her spend time with anyone else. Over time, it became increasingly clear that Peter considered her as his property, since he was often reminding her of the money he had invested in her life, supporting her and her kid, and that, in his opinion, gave him the right to control her. She grew more rebellious the more he attempted to manipulate her, Every time they went to an event together, Georgina stopped putting up with his allegations and demands. She publicly humiliated him and made him feel unworthy without hesitation. Her fiery and unyielding nature was suddenly working against him. Her actions grew more damaging. As Georgina's use of mind-altering substances increased and Child Protective Services learned of her unhealthy lifestyle, she further plunged into a world of illegal drugs and alcohol in an effort to dull the agony of her losses and failures. Concerned about Georgina's suitability as a mother to her daughter Emily, authorities opened an investigation. Simmons' initial response upon learning of the investigation was to place the blame on Peter. She was certain that in order to exert more control over her life, he had notified social services. Even though there was no proof that Morgan was involved, Georgina would not hear any justifications. She believed that he was to blame for all of her bad luck, so she chose to speak with him directly, which led to a heated argument. This controversy turned into the pinnacle of their escalating hostility. Peter, a man accustomed to dominance, was unable to release her. In order to keep tabs on Georgina's every action, he started spying on her. Making use of his access to the estate, he placed listening devices in the cottage, where Georgina resided. Since each device had a SIM card, he was able to make calls and listen in on what was going on in the room when he was at home. Every day, Peter would connect to the gadgets and listen in on her discussions. This concern with surveillance turned into a full-fledged obsession. To find out if Georgina was cheating on him or scheming against him, he would call the devices up to 10 times a day and listen to recordings for hours. Over 2 months went by, and the majority of the talks Peter overheard were routine, including small talk with friends and conversations with her daughter. But all that changed on January 10, 2016. George had a close friend over that day, and when Peter called to listen, the conversation changed. Georgina was venting about him, and he heard it. She said that although she felt stuck because of Peter's financial support, her life with him had turned into a nightmare. She acknowledged feeling like a prisoner in the estate, and resented him for bringing child services into her life. Thankfully, Georgia was not in danger of losing custody of her daughter because the child services investigation was over. She did not, however, intend to inform Morgan of this result. She understood that she could take advantage of his emotions to further exploit him and obtain more money. Georgina was aware that the possibility of losing her daughter was a potent instrument for manipulating Peter, and she was determined to take use of it in order to obtain as much as possible. However, she had a more ambitious plan. Peter heard Georgina candidly inform her friend that she planned to deceive him into signing the bungalow to her before permanently severing their relationship. The compromising video footage of the night they spent together with her friend, who had disguised up in Peter's wife's clothes, was another weapon she had at her disposal. By threatening to show the video to Morgan's ex-wife and daughters, she intended to blackmail him. Peter heard her plan and knew that everything depended on it. He realized that Georgina's goal was to ruin his life by taking advantage of his weaknesses. His whole universe seemed to be crumbling under him at that very moment. He was aware that his acquaintances and associates would abandon him if his daughters learned about the recording and would not want to interact with him. As he listened to these revelations in the quiet of his house, Peter Morgan experienced a range of emotions from shock to wrath, realizing that all he had worked so hard to build could fall apart in an instant. The fact that the lady he trusted was planning such a betrayal astounded him. Her remarks minimized all that he had done for her, exposing their relationship as a figment of her imagination in which he was only a puppet. After barely surviving the night on January 11, Peter started to carefully consider every stage of his revenge plan in an effort to take back control of his life. His phone's search history revealed his plans the very next day. He was researching everything he may require to carry out his scheme. Peter Morgan bought rope, rubber gloves, plastic bags, and zip ties from a hardware store on January 12. He made a beeline for the house where Georgina resided as soon as he got back to the estate. He made no effort to be polite this time. He addressed her right away and claimed to be aware of her plans. He made it plain that he would not permit things to go in that manner and accused her of blackmail. In a last-ditch effort to retain her, Peter promised her everything, including marriage and a portion of his fortune. As he tossed a stack of cash at her feet, he even proposed to get a life insurance policy, designating her as the beneficiary and guaranteeing her $1 million in the event that he passed away. However, she ruthlessly turned him down rather than accepting his offer. Peter became blindly angry after hearing her hateful and disdainful remarks. His goal was to scare her, so he grabbed the rope and looped it around her neck in an attempt to intimidate her. His intentions changed, though, when Georgina threatened to cover all costs. An act of brutality was the result of all the rage, frustration, and disappointment that were inside of him. Peter closed his eyes, tightened the rope, and kept going until her respiration ceased. Peter felt nothing but emptiness when Georgina Simon's life passed away. He wrapped her body in plastic, secured her ankles and wrists with zip ties, and put on the rubber gloves. Then, believing that no one would discover her there, he took her to an old family home where his family had resided. He concealed her in an outbuilding. However, his recklessness and haste proved to be his downfall. Every action was recorded by the security cameras he had personally placed, and authorities were able to follow Georgina's whereabouts thanks to her cell phone, which he neglected to switch off. Georgina's friends and acquaintances were worried when she failed to arrive to pick up her kid from school. When her absence became evident in the evening, the police promptly began searching. Morgan, attempting to stick to his story, emerged as the prime suspect. He stated that she had asked him to go when he saw her around noon. Peter tried to claim that he seized Georgina's phone to shield her from dangerous substances, but the police soon discovered that he was lying under pressure from detectives. He was brought to the station for more interrogation, nevertheless, because his account was not credible. A few hours later, he sobbed and admitted to Georgina's killing, saying he had been driven to the brink. He tried to defend his behavior by claiming that he had given her everything in the hopes of preserving their relationship, but all he received in return was dishonesty and threats. Peter Morgan's trial garnered a lot of media attention. He later attempted to argue for a lighter sentence despite his confession, pointing to emotional and mental health problems. An attempt was made to reduce the accusation to manslaughter by distress, but in the end, the evidence, including his own confession and the surveillance footage, was so strong that Peter Morgan was given a life sentence, with the chance of release after at least 25 years. This is where I want to take a moment to address every one of you directly. There is more to this story than a detective story or a criminal report. It's a tragedy that exposes the frailty and preoccupation of people. Attachment was mistaken for ownership by Peter Morgan, a man who yearned for acceptance and love. He ultimately fell prey to his own illusion that he could purchase a relationship with money. Motivated by her aspirations and the wish to provide her daughter with a brighter future, Georgina was unable to stop and became entangled in a game that ultimately led to catastrophe. Little Emily, who lost both her parents, is maybe the most sorrowful character in this story. She fell prey to adult games where she had no reason to worry about the future. Remember that if you own up to your faults early on and refrain from basing your pleasure on deception and power, you can always find a way out of even the most dramatic and challenging circumstances. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Without love, trust, and basic respect, what sustains a marriage? For the sake of the children, some attempt to keep the family together. Some are deterred by religious convictions or a combination of these, while others are concerned about other people's opinions and dread public criticism. However, the will to do whatever it takes to keep a marriage intact can occasionally degenerate into a terrible tragedy. Although Jacqueline and Paul Crimble's story is not unusual, its cruelty, selfishness, and cynicism garnered a lot of attention. The perpetrator was labeled the Black Widow and imprisoned, but in an open interview, her daughter admitted that her mother persisted in destroying lives while incarcerated. The connection between Paul Crimble and Jacqueline. Born on December 18, 1974, in County Armagh, Northern Ireland, Jacqueline, also known as Jackie Mary Bennett, was the younger of two children in a typical middle-class household. She was unpredictable, spoilt, rebellious, and occasionally even violent from an early age. Jackie's behavior worsened over her adolescence and eventually became uncontrollable, but her family blamed it on adolescence in the hopes that she would outgrow it. As they say, opposites attract, and this idea seemed to work wonderfully when she met Paul Crimble in high school. He was 3 years older than her and very different from her. Here, Paul was a quiet, reserved young man from a devout household who excelled academically and was seen as having great talent and promise. He was drawn to Jacqueline's confidence, vigor, and audacity. She was the first female he had a serious crush on, and perhaps the only one. Paul was welcomed by Jackie's parents, who supported her decision since they thought he would help their daughter become more composed, logical, and sensible. Her family accepted Paul like a member of the family from the moment they met, and at times it seemed that they treated him better than Jackie herself. Paul's parents, however, were wary of his decision, but did not dissuade the young pair from dating. The couple appeared to be incompatible, according to school friends as well. Paul attempted to settle everything amicably, avoiding violence, and was seen as amiable, forthright, and extremely responsible. But Jackie frequently incited arguments and preferred to settle them with physical force. A courteous, sensible, and mature young guy above his years, he was always dependable and always willing to provide a helping hand to others. When Jacqueline became pregnant at the age of 17, she informed her boyfriend that she was in her last year of school and that Paul, then 20 years old, was already enrolled in college. Paul said he was ready to marry her and assume full responsibility for her and the child as soon as he found out. Although Jacqueline wasn't prepared for parenthood or child-rearing, ending the pregnancy was unavoidable. Such a serious offense would not be tolerated by Paul or his pious family. Jackie accepted Paul's formal proposal when he purchased a ring. In 1992, the couple celebrated with their closest friends and family at a small wedding. Remarkably, just a few days prior to the occurrence, Hall told his best friend that he and Jacqueline were too dissimilar, questioned whether her sentiments were genuine, and was even scared of her because of her erratic behavior. Additionally, the groom questioned whether he genuinely loved her or if he was merely feeling obligated and sympathetic. However, he had nothing to compare because he had never dated other girls. After paying close attention, his friend attempted to talk Paul out of getting married by telling him that it would be the worst decision he ever made and that he would be miserable for the rest of his life. Paul was adamant, though, stating that he couldn't abandon a girl who was expecting his child. In addition, he thought that becoming a mother would improve Jacqueline's personality by making her softer and more composed. Paul had generally hoped for the best, but he was unaware of how mistaken he was. Life in the family without affection. The young couple's first child, a daughter named Danielle, was born at the beginning of 1993. Jacqueline gave birth to their son 6 years later. After the birth of their second kid, Adam Paul made sure his family had all they needed, because he was their only provider. In 2000, the offenders moved into a comfortable 3-bedroom townhouse in Armagh after deciding they needed a larger residence. Paul was making a good living as a senior mechanical engineer by that time. However, his wife claimed to prefer work and did not bother herself with it, running the home and bringing up the kids, but she was also not very good at either. Jackie was a short-tempered, greedy, and lazy person who frequently acted aggressively, even with her kids. Jacqueline attempted to find employment when the kids were a little older, but she was never able to hold down a position for very long due to her combative and argumentative personality. In addition, she went out to bars almost every evening to consume alcohol while her husband stayed at home with their son and daughter. Mrs. Crimble was not a particularly amiable lady, even when she was sober, and she became a true rage when she was drunk. In addition to starting arguments, she also got into fights, cursed, and acted inappropriately around different males. Nobody could foresee what she would do next, and she reacted aggressively to any comments or suggestions to act more humbly. Family, friends, and neighbors knew what was going on and truly felt sorry for Paul and the kids, who were the ones who were most negatively impacted by Jacqueline's actions. Many people were aware of the young woman's misadventures and made an effort to stay away from her because the family resided in a tiny, peaceful town. Her husband and kids were impacted by her negative reputation, and they had to deal with the fallout from their classmates. Jackie didn't try to disguise her crazy lifestyle. Her frequent visits to entertainment venues, however, made the staff and other patrons nervous because they knew that her presence would undoubtedly result in a brawl or altercation. Because she may strike out at any time, Jacqueline held her family in constant fear, although Paul made an effort to keep his mouth shut. His friends, family, and co-workers saw that he was uncomfortable with his wife or even just talking about her. Paul was frequently told to leave this woman, but he was afraid of losing the opportunity to see his kids. Jackie would instantly threaten to cut him off from their son and daughter in the event of any disagreement. She also threatened to use her friends against him. These were males she frequently saw at bars who were willing to break the law to protect her. In these circumstances, Paul typically gave in to his wife and said nothing. The unexplained assault on Sunday morning, June 20, 2004. A terrified woman begged for assistance by calling the emergency services. She said that she and her husband were ambushed in their home by 3 strangers who beat them, tied them up, tried to rob them, and then took their car and her husband with them. When Jacqueline Crimble called, police and emergency personnel hurried to the address she gave. They discovered a woman at the house with a plastic wire tie securing her hands behind her back. But since her legs were unbound, the authorities assumed she had partially freed herself. Notably, despite the victim's initial claims that the attackers had beaten and bound them, she had no wounds or bruises on her body. Luckily, the couple's kids weren't home because they were sent to be with their paternal grandparents for the weekend. Jacqueline claims that she and her spouse had gone to a pub on Saturday night to unwind. After midnight, they went home after drinking. But just as Paul was opening the front door, 3 people sprung into the shadows and shoved them inside. Armed with a revolver, the invaders battered and restrained the couple while requesting money and illegal drugs. Paul reportedly made an effort to placate the crooks by pleading with them to let him and his wife go and vowing not to notify the police. However, this only infuriated them. In front of the frightened Jacqueline, they struck him multiple times before starting to strangle him with a plastic bag. The attackers chose to at least take the car when it became evident that there was no money or illegal drugs in the house. But for some reason they took the owner with them, leaving the chained woman behind. Jacqueline was able to use her tongue to get to the phone and call the police when the thieves drove off with Paul. She pleaded with the investigators to locate and rescue her husband right away because she was certain he might still be alive. The authorities had no reason to suspect the woman, although she looked and behaved suspiciously calm despite her anxiety. The disfigured body in the trunk at that very moment. Investigators started gathering evidence at the crime scene as soon as the couple's car was reported stolen throughout the county. Although they made an effort to learn as much as they could about the assault, Jacqueline asserted that the culprits were disguised. She was unable to remember any identifying characteristics, such as limping, speech impairments, or specifics of the clothing. All she could say was that they were men, and there were 3 of them. Less than a day later, on Monday morning, the Crimble family automobile was discovered abandoned only 3 miles from the residence where the attack had occurred after the search got underway. It was parked next to a long, empty home in a secluded alley. The owner's mangled body, which was obviously beaten and tortured, lay inside the trunk. The 35-year-old man had several bruises all over his body and face, his hands tied behind his back, and his legs shackled with a wire tie. Jackie responded very composedly when she was told about the gory discovery. She didn't appear to mind her husband's cruel deprivation, who was also the father of her children. She made an effort to look shocked and hurt, but she was unable to shed a tear, so she asked when she would be able to have her car back in less than a minute. All of this seemed quite suspicious, so the police investigated the young widow, the primary suspect. At first, Jacqueline's version was accepted as the sole reliable one and was not questioned. Law enforcement, however, suspected the widowed mother of 2 might be lying because of her peculiar conduct. She was never a model wife or mother, and it soon became clear that she and Paul had been having a long-term, failing marriage. She was disparaged by her parents and kids as well as by neighbors and acquaintances. Additionally, it was discovered that Jackie had been dating Roger Ferguson for a number of months. He resided with his mother on the farm he owned in Armagh. She and Crimble were frequently spotted drinking alcohol together in the town's entertainment establishments. Additionally, Roger paid the married woman a visit at home while her husband was at work and the kids were at daycare and school. Roger was thought to be a potential accomplice, and Jacqueline switched from victim to the primary suspect just 1 day after the automobile with the mutilated body was discovered. The woman seemed far more focused on getting her automobile back than she did on being a heartbroken widow. In addition, her story of being attacked by a group of armed addicts sounded unbelievable. Where had they gone after leaving the car with a body in the trunk? and this was the first time something like this had ever happened in the sleepy town. It was also odd that the enigmatic crooks were able to leave no evidence behind. No other eyewitness reported seeing dubious visitors around the community. But nearly everyone who ever had contact with the victim had bad things to say about her. Furthermore, it was quickly discovered that the dead had an insurance policy, and in the event of his death, his wife could anticipate receiving a hefty settlement of £300,000. In this instance, a legitimate motivation that could account for the crime had emerged. Jacqueline said she was able to use her tongue to dial a button phone and make a help call during the crime investigation. In fact, there were traces of her saliva on the gadget when it was taken for inspection. Investigators did see, however, that the phone was on the coffee table, face down, with her hands bound behind her back during the first examination of the crime scene. If it had been in that position from the beginning, she could not have switched it over after the call or called for assistance. The couple's home computer search history showed odd searches. When Jacqueline was queried explicitly about the months-long search for information on life insurance payout amounts and procedures in the case of the policyholder's death, she claimed to know nothing and implied that maybe Paul would be interested. Roger Ferguson had a strong alibi and was thought to be a possible collaborator in the crime. According to his mother, he stayed at home the night since he wasn't feeling well, and at 1:30 in the morning, she was looking through the home medicine cabinet for a remedy for his stomach problems. The old woman's evidence was compelling, but her son was not yet taken off the suspect list. When police used the signals from the suspect's cell phones to monitor their whereabouts on the night of the crime, they found that Roger had not been home as his mother had reported. As an alternative, he spent many hours at the Crimbles' home. He also kept up his friendship with the widow, and the day after Paul's funeral, he was spotted with her at a bar. The fact that Roger and Jacqueline went to a car dealership together to check at SUVs and ask about payment arrangements for such a costly purchase was another oddity. Even more strange was the presence of Roger's mother. Roger's mother was probably aware that the authorities assumed the lovers had already decided how they would spend the insurance payout following Paul's death. Jackie said during questioning that she never cheated on her husband and that she didn't intend to hurt him, but soon after no one believed her. Jacqueline had begun working as a caregiver in a nursing home prior to the disaster, but she was fired after just a few weeks because of her persistent lying and arguments. She continued to act as though she was going to work or having night shifts while staying at Ferguson's residence, though, and kept this a secret from her husband. Paul encountered one of his wife's former co-workers who unintentionally told him everything about the lie. His attempt to speak with his wife just led to further arguments. She threatened to kidnap the kids, ban their biological father from seeing them, and leave him for her boyfriend. Paul decided to compromise and ignored her adultery because this was his greatest concern. His closest friend, who subsequently testified in court as a witness, was the only person he could confide in regarding the formulation and implementation of a cunning scheme. Roger wasn't very intelligent. Despite his strength, he was easily led and had a simple intellect. Jacqueline rapidly gained total control over him by coercing her lover into doing what she wanted. She was greatly charmed by the fact that he would gladly engage in combat for her. He probably believed whatever she said since he was truly in love with her. Ferguson heard the woman's complaints about her husband, who, she claimed, was physically violent, unpleasant, and harsh. All of this was undoubtedly false, but the lover detested Paul more and more with each grievance, thinking that he was the primary source of Jacqueline's suffering and oppression, and the primary barrier to their happiness together. She instilled in his mind the notion that by getting rid of her spouse, all of their issues would be resolved and they could live together while earning a sizable income for a pleasant lifestyle. Mrs. Kremble searched for somebody who would commit the crime for cash for about 2 weeks before to the catastrophe, but she and Roger gave up after weighing their alternatives in order to keep the full insurance payout. It appeared the lovers decided they could do it themselves without leaving any witnesses or evidence. Jacqueline took the kids to spend the weekend with their grandparents on Friday, June 18. She proposed to take her husband out for drinks on Saturday so they could unwind and chat. Paul was happy to accept the offer because he believed it could improve their relationship. It was an invitation to his death, but he was unaware of it. People in the bar that night saw Jackie making a concerted effort to make her husband, who doesn't drink, drunk. After midnight, she led her dazed husband out of the pub after purchasing drinks and almost forcing him to knock back one shot after another. The last time Paul was seen alive, they were captured on security footage. This exposed a notable disparity in timing. According to Jacqueline, the attack happened as soon as the couple returned from their 10-minute stroll to the pub and lasted no more than 15 minutes. She then reportedly phoned the police right away after her husband was abducted and taken away in their vehicle. But it took over an hour and a half from the moment they were caught on camera until the police were called. Investigators thought the offenders used this time to hide their tracks and set up a third-party attack scene. Furthermore, it seems that Jacqueline purposefully made her husband intoxicated, so he would be powerless to refuse. She said that after kicking Paul while he was on the ground, the crook started to strangle him by covering his head with a plastic bag and taping it in place. The type of injuries on the deceased's body supported her story, but by that point, the authorities had irrefutable proof that the attackers were her and her lover, Ferguson. Following a protracted and exhaustive investigation of the crime scene, investigators discovered a partially obliterated imprint of a man's shoe, the tread pattern of which matched Roger's shoes, that had clearly been attempted but unsuccessfully cleaned. However, this evidence can be regarded as circumstantial. Other, more important evidence against the criminal couple was discovered in the kitchen trash, though. A partial fingerprint of Roger's was found on the cable tie that bound Jacqueline's hands, and a cigarette butt with Roger's saliva was discovered. Ferguson's fingerprints were also discovered on the ropes that bound the deceased's hands and feet, and traces of both lovers' perspiration and oil were discovered on the bag that was used to suffocate the victim. A minor acquaintance of Roger's named Colin Robinson was also discovered to have participated in this heinous act by the investigation. On the night of the attack, Roger called him and asked for his assistance with an unidentified task. In order to avoid drawing attention to himself, the teenager drove his car, abandoned it at the end of the street per Roger's request, and walked to the house. Colin wanted to flee when he saw what was occurring, but Roger coerced him into helping transfer the body to the car and load it into the trunk by threatening him with a knife. They then took the vehicle to an empty location and left it there. The terrified young man first denied any involvement in the incident, but during the second interrogation he broke down and started confessing. Trial and punishment. The course of the investigation was several months. They collected indisputable proof throughout this period, spoke with every witness, and got the third criminal to confess. But the offender's trial didn't start until the spring of 2007, nearly 3 years after Paul Cramble was deprived of his life on May 7. The widow received a 20-year sentence after Jacqueline and Roger were found guilty of a premeditated crime with the goal to earn insurance money, in prison, while her accomplice and lover were sentenced to 18 years. Colin Robinson, the juvenile accomplice, received a 3-year term for helping the offenders and trying to hide the truth. Roger's aging mother was likewise unable to avoid accountability for perjury and giving her son a fake alibi. In retaliation against her own children, the woman was only granted a year of probation due to her senior age and severe health issues. Jacqueline persisted in ruining her family's lives while she was incarcerated. Everyone who knew her personally was relieved when she was put in jail, and she was upset that no one stood for her in court. According to her own mother, individuals such as Jackie ought to be permanently removed from society in order to prevent them from hurting others. It's interesting to note that Jacqueline destroyed all of her late husband's possessions and pictures a few days after the funeral, making the house completely devoid of any reminders of him. Somehow, Danielle was able to preserve a few pictures of her father. Her mother was unaware of them, and she kept them on her bedside table. Paul's children received the £300,000 in insurance settlement for which he was slain. Overnight, Danielle and Adam lost both of their parents, but their problems didn't stop there. Their mother was insistent that the children should not be raised by either her parents or the parents of the dead husband. The children were placed in foster care as a result of her efforts to deny them guardianship rights. Danielle was only 11 years old, and her brother Adam was only 5 years old when the tragedy occurred, even though they had living grandparents. From prison, Jacqueline tried to control her children while maintaining her parental rights. She specifically wanted them to use various forms of pressure to publicly declare her innocent. For instance, she said that if they came to see her in prison, she would sign off on their school trips. However, she misled them during the visit by refusing to sign the document and insisting they testify in her favor. Consequently, only the brother and sister were unable to accompany their class on weekend outings. Danielle is currently 31 years old, resides in Basingstoke, works at a daycare, and is seeing an engineer named Simon Bryce. Her 25-year-old brother relocated to London and has a decent degree. With Jacqueline's upcoming release next year, her adult children are extremely concerned that their mother would keep doing everything in her power to ruin their lives. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.